And we're live. All right. So usually we focus on a large amount of different fires in California. We go over Mcfarland, Monument, River Complex, Dixie Fire, Caldor Fire, all the new ones that have started in Southern California. But in this video today, we're mostly just going to be focusing on the Caldor Fire because this is a developing situation right now where there's some new evacuation orders being put in place. It looks like the fire has increased in activity over the last couple of hours, and the wind direction and the wind magnitude is looking like it is coming from a very concerning direction. And just looking at this map right here, so you can see where the fire perimeter was yesterday, and you'll be able to see why I'm so concerned about this fire right now. We have the Caldor Fire here. Those winds picked up this afternoon, and then if we look at the live hotspots, you can see those winds have continued to push this fire farther to the northeast. And to really illustrate why this is such a large concern, those orange dots that you see right there are the structures. Now, with that being said, this map, we've seen this in the past. It's not a perfect map, so I'm not saying that all of the structures underneath these hotspots have been destroyed at this point. And I'm also not saying that this is actually where the hotspots are right now. It comes from a heat signature picked up by a satellite in space, so those can be off as well. But it certainly paints the picture that this is something that we have to follow very closely over the next few hours as those strong winds continue. But as of right now, the Caldor Fire is up to 156,000 acres and 19% containment, but I imagine there's going to be some big updates once Cal Fire goes live, and it looks like they are live right now, so we're actually going to switch over to that video to get the information straight from the source. I'll try to answer any questions that you might have in the live chat, and then I'll be back to continue to follow the weather and the fire over the next couple of hours as this situation progresses.
Line from Dufresne Road due east to Amador Alpine County line, and from the Amador Alpine County line north to Highway 88. For El Dorado County, so I'd like to start with some road closures. Highway 50 closure has been extended east to Sawmill Road. Highway 50 at Sawmill Road. Pioneer Trail at Elks Club. Elks Club at Highway 50. Highway 89 at the Highway 88 junction. Fallen Leaf at Tahoe Mountain. We'd like to remind all residents that are going to fall within this area that your evacuation route should be east on Highway 50 or north on Highway 89. We do have the evacuation shelter that's still in place in Nevada, and that is the Douglas County Community Center at 1329 Waterloo Lane, Gardnerville, Nevada. So those orders are as follows. So El Dorado County, evacuation orders mandatory. Christmas Valley from Highway 89 west to Echo Summit. Highway 89 due west to Watershed Ridge, Echo Summit, and south to Amador El Dorado County line. The area from Luther Pass Road north along El Dorado Alpine County line to Armstrong Pass. West from Armstrong Pass to Upper Apache at Myers. West on Upper Apache to Highway 50, west on Highway 50 to Highway 89, south on Highway 89 to the El Dorado Alpine County line, and this includes all homes on both sides of Highway 89. The area from Upper Apache Myers along Highway 89, Highway 50 to Elks Club Drive, east on Elks Club Drive to Pioneer Trail, extending due south to Upper Apache at Myers. This includes all homes off of Mandan, Apache, Ottawa, and Player. The area north on Highway 50 from Highway 89 to Sawmill Road, west on Sawmill Road to Angora Ridge, extending to the Echo Summit. And in Alpine County, Highway 89 south from Luther Pass Road to Pickett Junction, Highway 88, west on Highway 88 to Kirkwood. So again, those are some new evacuation warnings and orders that were just issued just prior to this community meeting. And update on the incident.
Good evening, Eric Schwab, Operations Section Chief with Team 6. Obviously an active day with a lot of extreme rates of spread, critical fire movement causing additional evacuations. But I'll go all the way around the fire again. The bottom of the fire, the heel of the fire is still looking good. Division A is still looking good with tactical patrol. I do still have concerns with the forecasted wind that fire could spread into this unburnt island that we've been fighting so hard to keep fire out of. So that's why we're still diligently staffing in Division A. Division Delta, this on the west side of the fire, there's one little piece over here, a couple 100 acres in Butte Creek. It's this piece right here. Alpha Happy Valley and Butte Creek for the residents, that it just keeps slopping out of our dozer lines in there and keeps spreading. We re-engage, go direct attack on that. We've been doing that for 2 days, trying to get this piece burned in, and every day it stands up, makes slope runs up out of the Butte Creek to us. So heavily staffed in here. I just really want to get this area tied up so we can get some normalcy back in here. The one benefit with the wind, as this thing continues to do this, it burns back into cold black, but as it continues that southerly spread, every time it comes out, we end up in a firefight defending structures in that area. So still a very aggressive firefight that is challenging us and has been for the last 72 hours. Moving across 50, most of that is looking good, but everything is burning different today. We're seeing movement like we saw about 15 days ago. And we're trying to burn some of these islands out on 50 to prevent additional spot fires on the north side of 50. So we're currently engaged in that. As we move up here towards the head of the fire, burning conditions for the last several days have allowed us to be in here trying to go direct on this fire. And direct attack is the method that we always try and take when we have that option, because one, it's the best alternative, it's the safest alternative for us as firefighters to be right on the fire's edge, and we take the smallest footprint, and it's advantageous to us. We've been in there boxing with the fire for literally the last 4 or 5 days, burning. It would spot over. We had burned out again on the next line. And a couple days ago, I really felt we were turning the corner with it. And then today is about the clearest day that I've seen in the last couple weeks, with extremely low relative humidities. And today, to put it in perspective, we've been seeing about less than a half mile of movement in here on the fire's perimeter for the last couple weeks each day. And today, this has already moved about 2.5 miles on us, with no sign that it's starting to slow down. Therefore, we resort back to our number one priority: get people out of life. The fire burning above the structures along Highway 50 there to take the fire up and around and through town around those structures. Highway 50 is currently closed. Not only the road's closed, there's fire on both sides of that road. So it's impassable right now. As we move around, another area of the fire that is stood up today and challenged us is right here. We've been in there. We haven't been able to staff that for the last several days as adequately. I haven't been able to staff the entire fire adequately. But this area got caught in the wind, and it started to move, and it's burned aggressively all day, and it's about probably a mile all along from and L Lima through here up to Kirkwood. We're moving structure or equipment into Kirkwood. strike teams of engines, 25 bulldozers, 25 hand crews. We've added divisions to increase our span. We're trying to get turn black. So we'll work really hard to keep this piece here so we don't have 88 challenged in another area. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Eric Lee, Law Enforcement Liaison for IMT6. Ops just gave you a brief overview of what is going on with the fire, and obviously we had a very dynamic day-to-day. I'm going to walk over this map and kind of talk about some of the things that we did, and visually you can see what it is. First of all, I want to make sure that everybody out there, because I know phone calls are going to be coming in, I don't want anybody to be confused. So I want to make sure everybody understands the difference between a warning and a mandatory evacuation. Okay, so anything you see down in here in yellow along the map is a warning area. That means that you're in an area that you should be aware of what's going on around you. You should obtain and maintain situational awareness, and you should be monitoring news and stuff like that. You should start, if you feel you need to, preparing yourself. Should a mandatory evacuation be declared for your area, you're ready to leave that area. So you want to get things together like medication or things you might need, and make sure that they are accessible to you. So if the time comes up and it's time for you to go because of a mandatory evacuation, you have that time. So again, yellow is just a warning. It's letting you know you need to be aware of what's going on with the fire. Try to keep yourself updated. When we're looking in this red zone area, that's the mandatory evacuation order, okay? The order mandates that you need to leave the area. Today, the fire was more aggressive than what was anticipated. So we had to go ahead and enact some mandatory evacuation orders. So if you see, it actually went into not only El Dorado County, but Alpine County as well, and it affected this portion here, Zone 20, and then you can see a warning was added to Zone 19. So I want to make sure folks understand that the Kirkwood Resort right here is in a mandatory evacuation area. Okay, that is included in this. Also, what we did is we split the zones down here. Because the zones are so long, we did not see at this point a need to do a mandatory evacuation this far away if the fire moves in that direction a little bit. But what we did is we split the zone of a mandatory evacuation up here and over here, just south of the 88th way. But down here, it's still in a warning. You just need to make sure you're aware of your area, okay? So again, this map, if they're zooming in for me, hopefully they are, it shows the area so that you can get a visual realization of what areas we're talking about, and you can start making your way out. Again, the ways you should travel would be up along 50 or up along 89. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. With that, I'd like to go ahead and bring up the Forest Supervisor, Jeff Marcellet, for some comments.
Good evening, everyone. Jeff Marcellet, Forest Supervisor for the El Dorado National Forest. And I'm here alongside of Acting Forest Supervisor for the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit, Gwen Sanchez, and really in partnership, as you've heard me speak many times, with my agency administrator partner from CAL FIRE, Chief Mike Blankenheim. Today's been a rough day, and there's no bones about it. I think the team is doing an excellent job trying to stay in front of a very evolving fire. You know, a few days ago, I spoke about a federal surge package of fire resources, interagency hotshot crews, and engines that were mirrored with our cooperating agencies and CAL FIRE with dozers, and we thought we could make a stop on this Division Juliet. And today it let loose, and we have more predicted weather coming. So I just ask tonight that you heed the warnings, you pay close attention to the evolving nature of the warnings and the orders that the team issues. I think it's really critical that the public do what they can to be a part of an orderly evacuation. And we'll be here to answer questions and be available, but want to stress to you again the importance of following the guidance that the team from CAL FIRE and the Forest Service and unified command are issuing related to this latest of evolution of this fire. So thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you, sir. With that, I'd like to go ahead and bring back up our Ops Section Chief, Eric Schwab, to answer some of the questions that were submitted about the fire itself.
A lot of people are curious about the map and how to read it. So we break span of control. So we don't have too many people working for a supervisor. We try to have no more than 7. So we break that up by branches, which is this symbol, and divisions, which is this symbol. So within the branch, there's divisions, and those folks call the branch director when they need something, and then the branch directors call me. Otherwise, I think we're going to be up to like 17 divisions, and my brain, I just can't have that many people calling me and be productive. So that's how that's broken up. As far as lines and stuff go, all the X's are dozer line, black X's are dozer lines that we put in. The shaded gray ones are proposed dozer lines. Then we have hand lines, we have symbols for everything. This tells me there's a repeater. That's a symbol for a repeater. We have drop points that are on here. Throughout, that's just helps us navigate. The H's are helibases where we're landing helicopters. Incident command post is where we're at. So that's some of the map symbology and how to read it on there. Someone asking for an update on Strawberry and Twin Bridges. Again, we've been engaged. The fire came into Strawberry last night. Again, we were nursing the fire around all the structures, both on the east and west side throughout the night. And we're very successful. There was a ton of equipment up there. It was literally a traffic jam with fire engines up in Strawberry. And then the fires moved on to the ski resort and the additional structures on both sides of Highway 50 there, excuse me. And we're actively engaged. We're not actively trying to control the fire right now. We are in a defensive mode, just trying to do structure defense up there. And again, bringing more equipment in there to do more structure defense and structure prep even further out away from this incident. Someone's mentioned Yakko Lake has accessibility issues. How are we doing that? We're walking fire hoses in. If you went up 50 right now along several of the tracks, we're just laying fire hoses in right to Highway 50 where we park the apparatus, and we'll drag hose physically into people's houses and charge those lines when we need them and utilize them that way. So that is how we're getting in there. And last question, are we doing burning operations during the wind event? Typically, no. We don't like to burn in heavy wind unless the wind's in our favor. But if we have to do defensive firing operations to defend homes, to save lives, we will. But typically, like I said, in a 40-mile-an-hour wind, we don't want to put fire on the ground. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. One of the questions that came up was how do I check if my property is damaged? We did post a link in the Facebook Live. But also, I will give you the Linktree web address. That is linktr.ee/IMT6. So that's the best way I can get you guys to that website without giving you a longer website. If you go to that Linktree, there's 16 websites on there. The first one that shows up is the El Dorado County and El Dorado County Sheriff link to the site that shows you where you can go to check if your property is damaged or destroyed, as well as gives other information to you for help if you've been affected by the fire. Additionally, the other links in there show you the evacuation warning and order map from El Dorado County, as well as email signups for any of the updates. The NCWeb website to check from the Forest Service on the fire itself, as well as the Cal Fire website, so you can not only check this fire, any additional fires that are in the area that you're curious about, among other websites for you. With that, I'd like to go ahead and bring up one of our unified ICs, Dusty Martin, for some comments.
Good evening. My name is Dusty Martin. I'm one of the Unified Incident Commanders. Standing beside me are my partners as we go through a challenging and difficult day today. All of our agencies are represented, and all of our agencies have been in close communication and coordination to get additional resources and to keep moving forward with this incident. There's been numerous questions about resources. One thing to understand is that there is many other fires going in the state, just not in the north, but also in the southern part of the state. We're all competing for the same resources. We have placed a very large order for resources to come in and assist the Caldor incident with the new spread of the incident. Please heed to all the evacuation orders that have been placed. If you're in an order, please leave the area. If you're in a warning, please make sure you are ready to leave if that turns into an order. We are working constantly and tirelessly daily to see a mitigation to this incident. Each and every one of these agencies here, we are all working together to see that to an end. Each of us play an integral part. We have talked throughout the last couple of weeks of small wins, and some days we get the fire outpaces where we are. Today we didn't have a lot of wind on the fire, and it's gotten up and ran pretty good. With that is which caused the additional evacuations. I want to ensure you that all of us standing here will stay engaged and continually be engaged to see this incident to mitigation. We do have additional resources coming in and additional personnel to help us with some of the span of control issues that Chief Schwab talked about. With that, please stay on our social media accounts. With the press releases that are coming out, pay attention for changing information. We have one heck of a firefight going on today and will be for the next couple of days. We are trying to get the information to each and every one of you as soon as we can. And as we do, we will push it out to every platform. With that, thank you and have a great night.
Thank you, Chief. I'd like to reiterate with what Chief Martin was saying. Please stay in constant contact with us through our social media websites, our email sign up, so we can get all that important and immediate information out to you as soon as it comes out. With that, I'd like to say now we're going to have this in a condensed version of Spanish.
Buenas tardes, Ricardo Tlapala, vocero, California.
Alrighty, so I think that wraps up the English version for the community meeting for the fire, and I think there are some key things that they talked about throughout that video. So there's a lot of things that we can unwrap as we move forward into our update and forecast following exactly what's happening on the Caldor Fire. I think the first thing that stood out to me was when they said that this northeastern section had grown 2.5 miles throughout the day today. So if we actually want to see that, we can see where the perimeter of the Caldor Fire was yesterday. And they're saying that in the last few days, this northeastern section of the fire certainly was posing a large concern, but it was crawling along at maybe a half a mile a day. And then they said throughout the day today, this northeastern section has just taken off and has grown about 2.5 miles. So that is, once again, the reason this update and forecast today is going to be mostly focused on the Caldor Fire, because this is an ongoing situation where this fire continues to move up to the northeast right now. So we have to keep an eye on exactly where the fire is going and all the most recent information, and especially any new evacuation orders that may be popping up. So if we look at where the fire was yesterday, and we look at where some of those live hotspots are right now. Now, again, I always say this, but one thing is you can sometimes take these heat signatures with a grain of salt. It's heat signatures being picked up by a satellite from space, so certainly not saying that all of those orange dots right there that represent structures are actually overtaken by the fire, but it does give us some idea of where this fire is moving, but even more than anything, how fast this fire is moving over the last few hours. So it looks like that's where the hotspots had reached yesterday. This is a relative area of where the hotspots have reached now. Again, it's not perfect, but if we were to try to measure that basic distance, we'll go into the middle of the box there. That shows about 5 miles. So I think that illustrates my point that these hotspots right here aren't perfect. It's just the best resource that we have to use. They said it has grown about 2.5 miles though. The other key thing that they said in that area was that yesterday night it did get around the area of Strawberry, but luckily it sounded like they did have some good success last night. They had a huge amount of resources up there. They had seen this coming for quite some time, so they had even more resources than they could even handle up there, and it sounded like they had some very successful structure protection on Strawberry last night. And the most recent update I could find on actual structures destroyed in that area was saying there weren't any, but we are going to have to check that new damage assessment map that they referenced in that update. And I think that might actually be something we should focus on right now, because I know that's a resource that we haven't had in the past, that damage assessment map. So if we could find that, because with that you can actually see what structures were destroyed, where they were destroyed. In some cases you can even click on a photo to be able to see the structure itself. So that one shows, actually this is the map we should look at before anything else. This is the current evacuation order map, and as you heard throughout that Cal Fire update, there are unfortunately some new evacuation orders being put in place. That's not exactly helpful. Good thing I have another evacuation map for the Caldor Fire. I believe it's this link right here. So I think that's probably the top thing to be following over the next few hours as the situation is ongoing, is the importance of staying updated with those most recent evacuation orders, because that's something that can change within a matter of minutes. And once this map loads, you'll be able to see how it has changed in the last couple of days. Notice, I believe we can actually click into these counties. It shows not exactly showing the county names there. Yeah, these evac maps are not working too well for us right now, which is a shame. But zooming out, you can see relatively where those evacuation orders are in place. So I think with that being said, if you have a house or you're in this area, you can find this link in the description below. But then one other trick you can do, because you notice you can't exactly, I think that one at least. Yeah, so we're not, usually it says the exact situation that's going on, what's going on. So if you can actually see the words themselves, two things that I'll say. One, you can look at this based on the colors. The yellow, while it doesn't, right there it actually does say it. It says evacuation warning. So when you have a yellow evacuation warning, the difference between that and an order is yellow is more like get ready, get everything packed up, and stay updated with your local resources to find out exactly what's happening. With the red, that is an evacuation order. That means leave immediately because it's potentially turning into a dangerous situation. So I do want to see if we can see the updated evacuation warnings and orders that have been put in place. I think the place to do that would probably be the Caldor Fire Facebook page. Or let's see if we can, yeah, so we're not seeing that damage assessment map. Well, they might have posted that to their Facebook page, and we'll hopefully be able to find that as well. So going back to, I'm going to go back to InstaWeb here. And then we'll go down to the Caldor Fire. Again, this is, I think, the first thing that we should focus on is the current evacuation warnings and orders are in place, because that's the most important thing. You heard that in the Cal Fire update. They're saying that their priority on the fire as of right now is less on actually trying to fight the fire and more on structure defense and getting people to safety. Most importantly, the getting people to safety. And making sure all those evacuation orders run smoothly. So going in here, we might be able to find that damage assessment map they were looking at, but then we can also see some of the recent. So I'm going to bring this over to Safari. And one thing I will say while this is loading is, unfortunately, the fire weather forecast for Monday and Tuesday is actually looking even more critical than what it was today. So we are certainly going to take a very close look at the fire weather forecast, because Monday and Tuesday it looks like we are going to have some 40 to 45 mile per hour winds coming in, and they're coming from the exact direction that you wouldn't want them to be coming from the southwest. So that would act to push this fire farther towards the northeast. So if you're watching what I just did there, I went to the Facebook page. You can find that Linktree event right up there, and then it brings you to the Linktree. Right now we're looking for the damage assessment map. So again, this is the first time I've looked for this as well, so we're seeing this together for the first time in real time. And I imagine they won't have that much information on the northeastern edge of the fire yet, because it usually takes some time for damage assessment teams to come back, but it will give us our first look at exactly what happened in the Grizzly Flats area. So you can see where the majority of the structures that have been destroyed on the Caldor Fire so far are. Again, pretty much what we expected. Looks like the damage assessment teams have only been to this western edge so far. The reason for that is that, especially when you're currently focused on structure defense, currently focused on evacuating people, then you have to have priorities. So right now we don't have any of that information up there, but just to show you how this map works, you can basically zoom into an area that you're interested in. You can click on the structure itself. If it has that black color, that means there's no damage. The green color is affected, maybe 10%, and then that red color is where damage is greater than 50%. So, and then one other thing that you can do on this map is you can actually click on the structure itself, and then you click on the photo, and then in most cases it actually shows you what the structure looks like right now. And it's pretty devastating to see the destruction that already has happened on the Caldor Fire. If we were to go through a number of these photos, there's usually a common theme with a lot of these fires that we see, not only on the Caldor Fire, but what we see on the Dixie Fire as well. As you can see how hot the fire was as it was burning through, because in most cases the structures are basically just leveled to the ground with nothing left. So that's where it does become, you start to really understand that it's not just the maps and the red houses that we're looking at here, or the hot spots. This is actually something that affects people. You'd imagine all their memories, everything they have is within these structures. So that's where the human aspect of these wildfires can really start to feel it. Now, the big thing that I'm going to say moving forward is on this northeastern section, that's where the potential for more structures destroyed is unfortunately ahead. If we look at the hotspot map as of right now, again, this is, I think, the overall summary. If you get nothing else from this forecast, it's maybe what I'll say over the next 2 minutes. So that was the fire perimeter yesterday. Just to zoom out, we could get the whole wide view of what the Caldor Fire looks like, and then I'll turn structures off for a second so you can just kind of get a grip on where we are. There's Lake Tahoe, there's the Caldor Fire. Where you see the yellow perimeter, that shows where the fire perimeter has burned so far. Where you see the red area is where the hottest spots on the fire were yesterday. And then what you can also do is click on structures, which shows why we've constantly been talking about this western finger right here. This is one area in that CAL FIRE update that they talked about has been creating a lot of problems here. going over the containment lines. They have dozer lines in place, but the fire just keeps stubbornly going over them. So they did mention that that is an area that has been very tricky over the last 72 hours. So we will continue to follow that. As one thing that I notice on that western edge is how much unburnt fuel is in there, and also how many structures are in there as well. So bit concerning to hear in that CAL FIRE update that there has been a lot of what they call slop over in that region, some spot fires as well. So we will certainly continue to follow that as we move forward, because again, there's anywhere where you don't see that yellow shading is where there's still unburnt fuel, which is potential future fuel for the fire. But I think the big concern as we move forward is clearly this northeastern section, because you can see where the fire was yesterday. You can see where we have these thousands of structures just to the northeast of the Caldor Fire. And then the big development this afternoon, the reason we're going to be following the Caldor Fire very closely over possibly even the next couple of hours, as this is an ongoing situation right now, is what happened with the fire over the day today. This map shows where the live hotspots are, or it at least tries to. I always say that because we've seen time and time again that this isn't always perfect. Sometimes it shows it directly over all these structures, but it hasn't actually reached into that community yet. But it does give you a basic idea of the direction the fire is moving, and also the intensity that the fire is burning at. So yesterday, and actually the last few days, we weren't seeing that much intensity on any of our fires in California. They were certainly still active, but much better than some of those red flag conditions that we had in the past. There was one day on the Caldor Fire where it went from 5,000 acres to 60,000 acres, and we had a little bit of a break over the last maybe 3 days as the winds calmed down. But this afternoon we started to see much more critical fire weather conditions. It got very hot, it got very dry. They said in that CAL FIRE update that the winds weren't actually that big of a factor today, but just with that increase in heat and the low relative humidity, you can see how much activity we have, and especially on that northeastern section right there. Now, to illustrate why I'm mostly concerned about that northeastern section, it really comes down to the weather forecast. So if we go to windy here, this is a trick you can do on all these fires. Well, actually, that's one thing I should mention. Hurricane Ida, if you are currently watching this from Louisiana or you have family or friends, that is one of the top weather stories of the year going on in Louisiana right now. But again, I am a wildfire researcher and I've lived in California my whole life, so we are just going to be focusing on the wildfires today. And there we have some critical situations of our own, and especially in this Caldor Fire area. So once you save that lat lon from the CAL FIRE website, you can highlight it right there. What you can do with a lot of these fires, especially if you don't know exactly where they are, you can put them into the search bar in windy.com, and then it just takes you right to, in some cases, right to where the fire started, which in the situation for today isn't exactly helpful because we're more interested in where the fire is most actively burning right now. But actually that is kind of interesting because gives an idea of how far this fire has been moving farther and farther up to this northeastern section up here. So I think an area that I have a lot of concern is Strawberry right there. So let's just, because that is an area that they did see the fire come into it last night. It sounds like as of last night, a lot of their fire suppression tactics were effective. I saw one report as of 6 hours ago. They said they hadn't lost any structures in Strawberry yet, but a lot has changed over the last few hours, so I wouldn't exactly say that at this point. So this is driving home the critical conditions we had throughout the day today, what allowed this fire to pick up in intensity so much. Again, we had some warm conditions up as you get closer to Lake Tahoe and in the higher elevations. It just shows maybe in the high 70s to low 80s. On the western edge of the fire, that's where you're actually in the triple digits. But big factor throughout the day today is we had very dry air. You can see Relative humidity in the teens. I even saw some observations where we were in the single digits. So anytime that happens, it's easy for that fire activity to pick up, because the drier the air is, the drier the fuels get, and then the easier it is for that fire to spread, and also the easier it is for spot fires to start, where burning embers are picked up in the wind, dropped into these dry fuels, and then start new little fires and lead to rapid spread. Now, I'm interested to see what the wind gusts were today, because in that Cal Fire update, they were saying the wind gusts weren't actually a huge factor today, but you can see that at least the forecast product was showing some 30-mile-per-hour gusts, which is certainly a pickup from what we had the last couple days. What they mentioned might have been an even bigger factor than the winds, though, is how clear the conditions were. Over the last few days, with those weaker winds, the fire behavior was calming down, partly because of those weaker winds, but also because of what those weaker winds allow. The weaker winds allow that smoke just to settle down over the fire. You can see that is certainly not happening right now with that really massive pyrocumulus popping up on the Caldor Fire as of right now. You notice how fast it's moving off to the northeast. Now, what that really tells me is that there is some strong winds coming from the southwest as of right now, and again, that's a concern, because if you see the wind moving towards the northeast, that means that the winds are moving, or if you see the smoke moving towards the northeast, that means the winds are moving towards the northeast, which means future fire behavior will move towards the northeast, and unfortunately, that brings up the potential for spot fires as well, where you get some burning embers picked up into the smoke plume and then dropped out ahead of the fire, leading to some rapid increase in spread and potentially even some new fires as well. But the point I was trying to make before is why we had those calmer conditions throughout the last few days is because we had weaker winds. So instead of this smoke taking off into Nevada, we were actually seeing it settle down over the fire. And when that happens, you imagine sunlight trying to break through a thick layer of smoke. It has a very hard time doing that, so it makes your temperatures cooler, which in turn creates less temperature gradients, which makes your winds calmer. And if your temperatures are cooler, you typically have higher relative humidity as well. So it was the weaker winds that actually calmed down our fire behavior the last few days. And because it was allowing that protective smoke layer, but you can see that cleared out throughout the day today. And that was a big factor that they talked about in that Cal Fire update. They said it was one of the clearest days they've had in a while. So because of that, a lot more heat's able to get in there. It ends up getting a lot drier. And then as you can see, you get a rapid increase in fire behavior. So that, I almost hate to say what I'm about to say next, but that is not even close to as... I usually try not to be negative in these videos, but when we look at the fire weather forecast for tomorrow, there's really no silver lining that you can take from it. So just to show exactly what's happening, we'll start on temperatures and humidity first. So temperatures tomorrow, and the key thing to think about as I'm about to show you this is that the key thing we're concerned about is this fire moving farther up into the northeast, where you can see thousands of structures up here. So the last thing we'd want to see is strong winds coming from the southwest. So temperature-wise tomorrow, looks like it's relatively similar to today. Looks like on the western edge of the fire, we'd be in the 90s to possibly even triple digits. And then as you get into the higher elevations, you're in maybe the high 70s to the low 80s. Unfortunately, looking like it's going to be another very dry day with relative humidity in the low teens to possibly even single digits. But the big factor, and I think the most important thing that I might say throughout this entire live stream, is when we look at the wind gusts for tomorrow afternoon. You'll just have to wait a second for it to be updated. Looks, actually, that's less windy than the last time we looked at this map. That is very interesting. So it's showing 33-mile-per-hour winds tomorrow. A lot of the other reports I was looking at were still saying there was the potential for 40-mile-per-hour gusts. Let's see what Tuesday is looking like. So it's almost like they delayed the forecast a little bit. Now it looks like Tuesday is going to be the day where we have the strongest winds. And you notice the direction they're coming from. It's from the southwest, which, as I was saying earlier, is the last place that you'd want the winds to be coming from, because that will continue to push this fire farther towards the northeast. So looks like Monday, hopefully that is in fact true, that the winds end up being less than we originally thought. When we first looked at this map a few days ago for Monday's wind forecast, it was saying 45 mile per hour winds. Now it's showing about 35, but again, weather forecast models are never perfect, and there will likely be a pickup in fire behavior no matter what throughout the day tomorrow. Big thing to look at though is Tuesday, as it looks like we are still forecasting those 40 mile per hour winds. Interested to see if the whole forecast shifted into Wednesday. So yeah, now it looks like Wednesday's winds are a bit stronger than they originally were. So when it comes to all of that, taking all of those factors into account, that we're going to have warm temperatures, it's going to be low relative humidity. You can almost just see some of those new hotspots pop up on this map. As I was just talking, it just showed where those new hotspots have popped up. So one thing that I'll point out there is something that they pointed out in the CAL FIRE update, that we have hotspots on both sides of Highway 50 now, and it looks like it has certainly picked up in that area south of Highway 50. Yesterday and in previous days, we were seeing the majority of the activity was on this side to the north of Highway 50, and they were having some challenges in this area to the northeast of this part of the fire, northeast of Cody Lake. But as of yesterday, it seemed like they were, even the CAL FIRE representative said, as of yesterday, they were still feeling okay in that area. They had a lot of resources. They'd done some great work. But he said conditions were just out of hand today, and that's where the fire got a bit out of hand today. And you can see where we are picking up some of those new hotspots right there. And we're just going to have to continue to try to update that map as we move forward to see if we start seeing more hotspots in the Twin Bridges, and then hopefully not eventually Phillips and some of these other areas as we get closer towards South Lake Tahoe. Now, one thing I will say while we're looking at this map is up on this northern edge, that should start to work in our favor somewhat. Because you notice where you see this very dark green color, that's where it's very thick forest, and in this case, that's where a lot of the trees have been, basically millions of trees throughout the Sierras have been killed due to bark beetles and disease. So a lot of dead, dry fuels in this area. That's part of the reason this fire's been so active. But as you get into that whiter color up there, that's where you're transitioning to the higher elevations. That means it's a lot rockier terrain up there. So as that fire moves out of the dense, heavy, dry fuels and into that rocky terrain, it should start to slow down up there, which is good news up there. But with that same kind of reasoning, that's where we have some bad news in this area. As you can see, it's very continuous fuels. That dark green color, basically continuous throughout this entire area, which is certainly a concern when you combine that with how many structures we have in that area with the wind forecast over the next couple of days. So when we looked at that fire weather forecast, you can see we did have some very challenging conditions coming in. So it'll be no surprise when I zoom out right here and show you that the National Weather Service has issued a red flag warning directly over the Caldor Fire. Again, this is honestly the last thing that you want to see when you're already seeing such a large increase in fire behavior, is to see that conditions over the next couple of days are actually going to get even worse. And again, I'm not saying that to purposely scare anybody or anything like that. It's just that we've been following all the wildfires throughout California for I believe we first started following maybe the bootleg fire and the lava fire over a month and a half, maybe even 2 months ago. And I would personally say that the current situation that we're seeing in this Lake Tahoe area on the increase in fire activity that we've seen across the Caldor Fire today, and then the fact that our wind gusts, especially it looks like Monday, Tuesday, and now possibly even Wednesday afternoon, around 35 to 40 miles per hour. I would say that factoring all of those things together, it's one of the most critical forecasts we've put forward throughout this entire wildfire season. Again, I say one of the because we did have some very sketchy days on the Dixie Fire where one of those ended up actually coming true, where it ended up going through Greenville. Again, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who was affected by that. Then we also had those days where it looked like that spot fire was going to be pushing into Janesville, looked like hotspots were moving closer to Lake Almanor and places around Susanville. But I would put this up there within top 3 forecasts that look like it is going to be a very challenging next 48 to possibly even 72 hours on the Caldor Fire when you factor in all of those different things together. So interested to see exactly what timing they have on this red flag warning, because we did see that it looks like those winds are still going to be relatively strong on Wednesday. So as of right now, they show red flag warning is effective from August 30th at 11 a.m. through the 31st at 11 p.m. So we'll just have to see if they continue to extend that farther into the forecast. But as of right now, we do have that red flag warning over us for what appears to be the next 2 days. Just looking at the calendar, it is the 29th right now, so it goes into effect at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then it's 11 p.m. 2 nights from now. And this is always helpful just to look at the quick summary for exactly what this means. Basically, what a red flag warning means in one sentence is critical fire weather conditions, which increases the probability for fire starts and an increase in fire spread as well. But if we actually look at what the red flag warning is saying itself, you can see red flag warning Monday through Tuesday evening for the Sierra Nevada and Southern Cascades. Gusty west to southwest winds, that's what we are showing on this map. Those winds coming from the southwest, which is the exact area we don't want to see those coming from, because that will act to try to push the fire farther towards the northeast. Thank you, Kathy, for the super chat. And also apologies to if anybody's been, that actually reminded me to look at the live chat. So also thank you for that. Apologies to anybody who's been posting questions or comments in the live chat. Right now I'm just trying to get out the most concise information that I possibly can. And then I'll hopefully try to go through some of the questions in the live chat to see what people might be asking, or if they have some recommendations for different cameras to look at as well. But getting back to that alert, you can see gusty southwest winds to develop over the Sierra Nevadas. Strongest winds are expected late Monday morning through Tuesday evening, which combined with low humidity and extremely dry fuels will lead to critical fire weather conditions during this time frame. Elevated fire weather conditions are also possible this afternoon through Monday morning over mountain ridges, and near wind-prone gaps and canyons may continue into Wednesday. That's something that we were talking about as well, due to locally gusty winds and lower humidity. So that, I'm actually glad we read that, because that basically summed up everything that we've just been talking about for the last 15 minutes. Very critical situation going on over the Caldor Fire right now, and unfortunately over the next couple of days, that critical situation is not only going to be continuing, but possibly even getting worse. So now something that we haven't done yet, that I think, actually before we look at some of the live cams first, I will just remind everybody that there are some new evacuation warnings and orders in place. You can find a lot of the links for these in the description below. You can go to their Facebook page. You can either go to InciWeb or calfire.com for all that kind of information. But as of right now, I want to actually get some eyes on what this fire currently looks like. So we always have trouble. Want to close that up. So right there, this is the camera that we're going to be looking at as of right now. it looks like it's looking from the southwest up towards Kirkwood and the Lake Tahoe area. So let's actually see what it's looked like over the last 3 hours. And thank you, Husky Eagle, for the super chat as well. I will treat myself to a nice dinner after this live stream, although it might be about maybe 9:30 by the time we wrap this up, given the current situation going on right now. But thank you very much. So just want to go back because just in case you missed it, like I did miss it just now, large amount of activity going on the Caldor Fire. You can see looking much more active than in previous days. The big thing I noticed there actually ties into what they were saying in that Cal Fire update. They were saying it was one of the clearest days that they've had in a while, meaning that you could actually see what was going on, which you might think was a good thing because it would allow for more aircraft. You can actually see some of those helicopters going through this imagery. So you might think that's a good thing, but unfortunately, when you don't have that thick smoke layer like we had the last couple of days, it allows more of that sunlight to come through and makes your conditions a lot hotter, which then makes it a lot drier, which increases your fire activity. And it also looks like we had some stronger winds this afternoon as well. So that is currently showing a lot of activity going on right now. I did just see one question pop up. Doesn't GOES work off infrared? They'll see everything in that case. So that is true. So when we actually go there, we're looking at GOES live right there. And I believe something that they're almost doing to make those hotspots, I think they're taking this natural color fire, which I believe shows like radiative power coming off of the Caldor Fire. And actually, I'm glad you reminded me of this because we hadn't looked at this throughout this video yet. It'll start to update in a second. So where you see those red spots, I believe that's how they make those hotspot maps. I believe they've figured out a way to kind of interpolate that onto the other map that we look at. But you can see that clearly it's looking much more active than in previous days, and unfortunately much more active on that northeastern section there. So just to drive that home, we can see once they take that hotspot data and put it onto the hotspot map, you can see where a lot of that activity is, much more on that northern section than we were seeing in previous days. So again, that's the big thing that we're going to be following over quite possibly the next couple of hours. But do want to try to check out some of these other cams in the area. Let's see if this one, Leak Springs. I think I peeked into the live chat and somebody had recommended this one at some point. So going to be interesting. Wow, it looks like it's very close to the camera. I wonder if we're going to see the fire itself go through this camera over. We might see this camera get burned over the next couple of hours. It looks like the fire is, I don't know what your guess would be. That looks like it's maybe 200 to 300 yards away from the camera as of right now. And then I'll pause it just for 1 second to point out where this camera is. Again, it's a bit farther to the north than the last camera we were just looking at. Looks like it's looking up to the Kirkwood, Lake Tahoe area once again. So now pressing play. Yeah, this is certainly going to be a camera that we have to watch over the next couple of hours because it looks like it's about to burn over the camera. It looks like there's a person down there right now. So oh, you can see the aircraft come through right there. One thing I would say is when I see people in these maps, it actually sometimes makes me feel better about what's going on, because you imagine if the situation was completely out of control, there would be no people in that area whatsoever. They would have gotten out of that area already. But it was also interesting to see that time lapse failed. I wonder, it doesn't look like the camera would be taken down yet, but we are gonna, I'll close the windy map so it loads a little bit faster. So you can see, one thing I noticed on a lot of these trees do look extremely dry. That's something we've talked about throughout all of our different videos, is that the fuels right now are critically dry. This is also an area, we can look at the tree mortality map in a second, but basically millions of trees throughout the Sierras were killed due to bark beetles, drought stress, disease, all kinds of factors working together. So there's a lot of very dry fuel, and you can see how that dry fuel interacts with the fire. When there's just a continuous forest like that, you get lots of activity, and you can, interesting, it failed again. So I wonder if, it certainly doesn't look like from that angle that the fire has overtaken it as of this point. But you never know if the fire is maybe coming around from behind it. So I'm interested to see if we can just look at the last 15 minutes to see what it looked like, because it looked like it was stopping about 2 hours ago in that other view. Oh wow. So you can see, you call that torching, where an entire tree just goes up in flames like that. And we'll see if it actually decides to load this time. Yeah, so that's a good point that somebody just said in the comments. Goes is more sensitive but less accurate, can be off by more than a mile. I think we saw that when we were measuring the hotspots today in the Cal Fire update. They said that it had grown by 2.5 miles today. But then when we actually looked and measured it on the Cal Topo map, it was saying that it had grown 4 miles today. So yeah, the goes can certainly be off, and that's why I do always try to stress that point when I'm showing that map, because sometimes it can be very alarming when you see all those hotspots directly over just thousands of structures right there. That's the key point to maybe drive home, is that this map can be off by quite a bit. So in this situation, let's certainly hope that it's off, because it looks like this fire has just taken off throughout the day today. But again, as of last report, Cal Fire update was saying that it had grown about 2.5 miles since this time yesterday, which was about 5 times as much as it was growing in previous days. So let's just look at this one more time. Try to load it again. And I don't know why the time-lapse keeps failing there. Maybe try it on Safari or something else to see if we get a better, see if it decides to stay going. But you'll be able to see that torching that goes on for a second there. And then I believe they pan over and start showing where that smoke plume is. Regardless, this is definitely going to be, there's that torching going on right there. This is definitely going to be a camera that we have to continue to watch over the next couple of hours. One thing that I will say is it looks like the fuels calm down as you get to what looks to be where this camera station may be on top of a ridge line. So it looks like there's a lot less fuel in that area, which means fire should have a harder time having that kind of activity as it moves closer to this camera. But we will certainly keep an eye on it. So somebody just said there's an infrared cam at the top of Heavenly showing the fire cresting Echo Summit. That is important information I think you should show. So if you have the link for that and you could post that in the live chat, I would definitely love to show that. I do have one link that does have access to infrared cameras. I forget, you can see how many different wildfire updates and forecasts we've been doing. I forget exactly which one. So this one was the infrared camera we were looking at for the Dixie Fire. I'm curious to see if they also have cameras. So that's at least good news. We haven't talked about the Dixie Fire yet, but looks like that camera is looking relatively calm. Caldor Fire Fleur, or Fleer, I never know how to say that word. So, yeah, I think this is exactly what who put that great comment in? Taj? Or it was Mark who put that in. I haven't read Taj's comment yet. What does it mean if crews were on our property and nearby cabins staging and clearing, and now they're moving up to the 50. Does this mean crews have moved the fighting effort line? So I think what that means is that they're basically prepping. They're removing a lot of the fuels around the structure. In some cases, I've even seen it where they just cover a house with retardant. And then I've also heard recently that they make sure they have some water hookups and pipes or hoses around that area just in case the fire were to get in there. And then once they stage one area, which means working on that fire protection, then I'll click play on this in the meantime. Then they move on to another area to continue to start working on that fire, some of those structure protection strategies. Now you notice, got a little distracted there in my train of thought because you can see all of that activity. Mark mentioned what summit that is, Cresting Echo Summit. And yes, I would agree that is certainly some important information right there. Now, one thing that I always point out on this map is in some cases it can make the fire look much for the first month of doing these update and forecast videos I actually wouldn't show this map because I thought it was a little it promoted fear a little bit, because in some of these images it makes it look like the flame heights are like 3,000 feet tall. But it is a very good resource to be able to use, and then I just make sure to point out that that's not actually all flame going up right there where you see it go up what looks to be maybe 2,000 feet. That's where you get that superheated air directly over where you are getting a large amount of fire activity, and then that superheated air starts to move up, and the infrared camera is just picking up that heat. And then just the way the coloring on this imagery works makes it look like it's all flame going up right there. But yes, certainly a good camera to show. Again, if you're just tuning in, this is, Mark said it is Echo Summit that fire is currently going over the ridgeline. And usually you try to see what direction the smoke is moving to figure out what direction the fire is going. But it looks almost like the smoke's just going directly up at this point. Just based on the topography though, you can imagine that the fire has burned up the other side of this mountain, and then it'll slowly try to find its way down this side. Now that's, I think, where possibly the one silver lining that we could take is that fire moves much slower downhill. So it should move down this hill a lot slower than it most likely moved up the other side of this mountain. But with that being said, it's a little hard to tell on just based on this imagery, but it looks like you have completely continuous fuels in this area. I imagine basically all of that is trees right there. And as I was saying earlier, in some cases where the trees, actually, I am going to show that right now, the tree mortality viewer, because I think that's a key thing to drive home, especially in this area when we're looking at some of the live cams where even before the fire got to the area, it looked like a lot of the trees were already dead. And this is actually something that's been going on for maybe a decade as of right now. I think it really started to escalate when we had that big drought in 2014. I think it ended in about 2017. A lot of the trees throughout the Sierras and actually the Rockies as well basically didn't have enough water, so they were weakened, and then bark beetles were able to come in, and you can see, unfortunately I'm not seeing the legend right now. Yeah, we don't want that. But the coloring is based on percentages of trees in that area that are considered dead. And you can see how the tree mortality impacts have been directly over where we are currently seeing the Caldor Fire. And that's why I tie that into the infrared map we're looking at. Gives an idea of why we're seeing so much activity, because you combine it with not only the fact that there is a large amount of fuels, but a lot of these fuels have already been killed due to bark beetles, due to disease, and just being water stressed in general. It wasn't enough that we had to go through that one drought in 2014 to 2017, but now about 90% of California is currently in extreme drought conditions, including that area. And I'd actually be interested to see the most recent drought update, and then we'll really get back to the Caldor Fire in a second here. I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but it is a big part of the reason that we're seeing so much activity on the Caldor Fire right now. So looking right here, also interested to see exactly what it looks like directly over this area. So looking at the drought monitor, yeah, you can see that Caldor Fire area is in that bright red color, which is in the extreme drought category, and we might even have the western edge of that fire in that exceptional drought category. So with that leads to very dry fuels. Our work with the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory has shown that a lot of the fuels right now are the driest that we've ever recorded. So gives an idea of why you end up having as much activity as we are having right now. So if you are just tuning back into the live stream, it's been a while since I gave the overview of the situation developing on the Caldor Fire, so be useful to go back over that. I will take one quick sip of water for a second here though. So I do see that somebody commented, do you think they'll lose Lake Tahoe? So that is a very hard question that's difficult to answer because there's so many different factors going on right now. So I think there's two ways that you can look at this. There's kind of the good news and the bad news. So I'm just going to give you the good news and the bad news, and then you can kind of make up your own mind on how bad you actually think it's going to get. So we'll start with the bad news. So the bad news is that if we look at where the fire perimeter was yesterday on the Caldor Fire, and actually we'll focus on the northeastern section mostly throughout this, so I just briefly want to say the other one concern, I shouldn't say one concern, but other concern on this fire is we do have this hotspot area on the west that continues to jump over containment lines, and that is an area where we have a large amount of unburnt fuels, and they said that has been causing a lot of trouble over the last couple of days, so we will continue to follow that over the next couple of days as well. So certainly wanted to mention that, but the key area of concern on the Caldor Fire right now is that northeastern section. So bad news first is if you look at where this fire perimeter was yesterday, you can see that even yesterday we had large amount of activity where you see those red hot spots, and you notice that it is on both sides of Highway 50 as of right now. Last night it was able to go into the strawberry area, and then I think this is where the real bad news comes in, is when we look at the hot spots as of right now. You can see how far that fire has moved to the northeast throughout the day today. You can combine that with the fire detection, where you can see earlier in the day when this restarts, you'll be able to see it better. Earlier in the day, we certainly had some activity on that northern section like we had the last 72 hours, but then over the last few hours, it has just started to take off, and you can see it turns into that bright red and orange color, and you can actually see it moving farther to the northeast just looking at that satellite imagery right there. And then if you were to look at the smoke coming off of it as well, you can see a very large pyrocumulus cloud. We're also looking at some of the live footage itself, where you can see the live imagery of, so we can actually go back to it, where we're actually looking at some of that fire activity itself. We had some large plumes throughout the day today. We had that torching going on right there. Looks like we're going to have to keep an eye on this camera to see if it's taken out over the next couple of hours. That's actually the first thing I should say. Large number of evacuation warnings in place. And then we're also, another image that shows how active this fire is right now is this one that shows the infrared imagery of that fire. It's going over what Mark called Echo Summit. So large increase in activity throughout the day today. I think that's the main point. Over the last few days, we had that nice smoke inversion that was keeping our conditions a bit calmer. We certainly still had some activity on all of our fires, including Dixie and Caldor over the last couple of days, but it was as that smoke cleared out throughout the day today, it allowed more heat to get in, which dropped that relative humidity down, and the fire activity really started to pick up. And unfortunately, you notice that smoke is going towards the northeast, which means the winds are coming from the southwest, which means it's going to continue to try to push that fire farther towards the northeast. So in the past few days, when we had that thick smoke over us and conditions were calmer, this northeastern section was growing maybe 0.5 miles a day. And in that Cal Fire update, they said that throughout the day today, it's grown about 2.5 miles. And we watched that update about an hour ago. So, and just based on how much activity we're seeing based on the satellite, based on the active hotspots, based on the imagery that we're actually looking at in real time, I always mix that one up, based on the imagery we're actually looking at in real time, it certainly looks like that 2.5 miles that it had grown earlier is most likely over 3 as of right now. So that's where the bad news comes in, but is also not over. I think what might actually be obviously what's going on right now is certainly its own critical situation. There's some new evacuation orders and warnings in place. Again, if you live in this area, the number one thing you should do is stay updated with your local resources to find out exactly what's going on. But where I think the biggest part of the bad news going forward, so again, looking at where that fire has extended over the last 24 hours, there's the fire perimeter from yesterday. There's where the hot spots are showing up right now. Those orange dots represent structures. And so you can see it's been moving towards the northeast over the last couple of hours and has certainly picked up in activity compared to what we were seeing in previous days. And the bad news is that when we look at the wind forecast for the next 3 days, if we try to click into this area, we'll go right about this area, northeast of Strawberry. You can see tomorrow's forecast is showing 33 mile per hour wind gusts there. We are seeing some forecasts that are showing up to 40 miles per hour though. And then as we get into Tuesday, actually forecasting even stronger winds around 40 miles per hour. And you notice the direction that it's coming from. It's coming from the southwest. So the reason that's such a concern is that combined with the warm temperatures that we're going to be having and the low relative humidity and the low teens to possibly even single digits, that's about as critical of a fire weather forecast as we've looked at throughout this entire season. And it's coming from the exact direction that you wouldn't want those winds to be coming from, which will act to try to push that fire farther to the northeast. One way the winds do that is just literally pushing the flames forward. Another reason that's so important is because as you imagine, you can see those large smoke plumes. As you get all that rising air right there, you get more air funneling in, and it's able to do that even more effectively when you have those strong winds. And what that does is supplies even more oxygen to the fire as well, which is one of the 3 things that a fire needs, along with heat and fuel, to be able to continue to burn at all. So winds not only push the fire forward, they lead to an increase in oxygen, which increases fire activity. But I think the number one factor when it comes to winds and fire, and this is something that we've seen on the Caldor Fire when it jumped over Highway 50. This is something that we saw on the Dixie Fire when it jumped over the firing line and then grew 15 miles in one day. It's the impact that those winds can have on spot fires. So that's where you imagine if you have some 40 mile per hour winds pushing from the southwest over where we're seeing these hot spots, it picks up some burning embers and then drops it down here, drops it here. And that's where it ties into what we were talking about with how critically dry the fuels are right now. Some of the lowest fuel moistures that we've ever recorded. and a lot of dead and dry fuels as well. When those burning embers are picked up by the winds, dropped in those critically dry fuels, then I was hearing one CAL FIRE representative say there's about a 90 to 100% chance that that burning ember then turns into its own little fire, which you call a spot fire. So one reason that has played out throughout the season as one of the big factors that leads to active fire spread is it just basically moves the fire forward faster than if it just had to move along the ground the entire time. But the other thing it does is it makes it much harder to actually fight the fire, because it's hard to have a strategy and go direct on the fire and be suppressing it when all of a sudden new little fires keep popping up all around you, and then you have to keep adapting your strategy and your situation. Thank you very much to Driving and Adventures for the super chat. So I will try to answer your question here. Thoughts on greater Kirkwood area. So let's go back to this map because they did update the hotspots. Just going in here, we can actually type in Kirkwood so it goes directly to it. And so it looks like Kirkwood will have some challenging conditions. This kind of ties into what I was talking about, literally just talking about when it comes to those strong winds that we're going to be having throughout the day tomorrow. They're coming from the southwest. So where we have these hotspot activities right here, that will continue, that fire activity right there will continue to push to the northeast with those strong winds that we're going to be having tomorrow, 35 to 40 miles per hour. So I'm certainly keeping a close eye on that area. Looking at the evacuation orders and warnings, this map, I'll try to update it again, but right now, for whatever reason, God, probably the worst time for this evacuation warning map not to be working correctly. But usually you can click on this map and I wonder if it's because so many people are accessing this map right now that it's basically, yeah, that might be what's happening. Perhaps so many people are accessing this map right now that usually you can see exactly what areas it's talking about, but you can't see anything in that red right there is where there is a current evacuation order in place. So that's one of the key things to follow when it comes to this fire. You can see some new ones popping up around the South Lake Tahoe area. So that does give you an idea on the current situation that we have right now. So looks like some of these look like they're maybe showing some names. That one shows Echo South. That one shows Hellhole. That one shows Washoe Meadows, Caples Creek. So lots of new evacuation orders in place. Where you see that red right there is where it is mandatory. That means basically get out as of right now. Where you have that yellow right there, that's where it's saying get ready to get out right now. Maybe pack up everything that you might want to have in your house, and then also do possibly some structural protection if you can. A big one, if you can, again, not certainly disclaimer on this, but one of the best things that you can do to protect your house is to blow the leaves off of your roof and out of your gutters. I believe I saw a fact that about 80% of the houses that burn down in a wildfire is because burning embers drop onto the roof where there's a lot of leaves, or drop into one of the gutters, and then it basically starts a fire on your roof, and then that leads to the structure being destroyed. So again, not suggesting anybody does that, but if you are willing and able, that is one of the best things you can do if you're in that yellow area and working on getting stuff together, getting ready to be ready to evacuate. If you're in the red area, again, where that mandatory evacuation order is in place, that's where you really should just get out as of right now, because looking at the hotspot activity, looking at the maps we have, looking at the satellite imagery as well. It is a very serious situation going on, and I think the worst thing to say, I kind of went off on a tangent right there for a second, but basically the worst part of the bad news is not only that it picked up in so much activity throughout the day today, we have all those new evacuation orders popping up. Looking at the hotspot map right now, it looks like it's starting to move further into where we have some of these communities and structures. But I think the worst part of the bad news is that as we get into Monday and Tuesday afternoon, the fire weather conditions are actually just going to be getting more critical. The winds are going to be picking up tomorrow afternoon. As we get into Tuesday afternoon, they're going to be even stronger, up to 40 miles per hour. And then if you look at the direction that it's coming from, it's from the southwest. So that will act to try to push that fire farther up to the northeast, which is the exact place that we don't want it to move because we see the large amount of structures up there. So key things that I think wrap up the bad news is when it comes to the current evacuation orders going on right now. I think that's the first thing that should be on people's mind right now, is what's actually going on the ground as of right now, the current evacuation orders, and when it comes to the large increase in activity that we're seeing. And then I think where the big concern comes moving forward is that fire weather forecast for Monday, Tuesday, and even into Wednesday as well, where zooming out on this map, you can see that the entire Caldor Fire is in that red flag warning. Again, a red flag warning basically means that it's an increase in fire weather, critical fire weather, and it makes it easier for new fires to start, like some of those spot fires that we were talking about, and then it also makes it just easier for the fire to spread in general. Now, I see somebody just asked, should I evacuate SLT? That is one thing, like one of the few questions that I actually won't answer. And I have a meteorology background. Right now I'm getting my master's in meteorology while mostly researching wildfire. I'm doing my master's thesis is on tying together fire weather and meteorology. So I certainly am not the person to ask about the current evacuation orders and warnings. The place to get that information is from the resources themselves. I believe I put a lot of those links in the description, like the ones to this map, also the Cal Fire website and the InsuWeb website. That is definitely the place to get the most recent evacuation orders, because the other reason that I have a policy of not telling people when to evacuate, one, I'm sure that would make me liable for any bad situations that might happen, but also because there's only so much we can figure out based on these maps, and the people on the ground really know what's going on a lot better. So it's best to get that kind of information from them. One thing I'll say though is that when you do access this map, that yellow color right there means there's an evacuation warning. The red color means there's an evacuation order. So the yellow color means basically get ready to evacuate. That red color, and I should make sure I keep updating this map just to make sure I'm not showing an old one and confusing people. But that red color means that there's currently an evacuation order in place and the time to leave is as of right now. Thank you also, Robert, for the super chat. So one thing that I actually was just reminded about looking at this evacuation map, you might be very curious as to, so you imagine the fire is, I believe, down. It's hard to match this perfectly up with the other map we're looking at, but you might be wondering why we have evacuation orders up here where you have that red color and then evacuation warnings in areas that actually look like they would be closer to the fire. And I think the best way to understand that is looking at this map right here. You notice how the fuels change. So that's, again, showing the fire perimeter where you see that red shaded color. Where you see those circles, that's where the most recent hotspots have been. You can see that it is on both sides of Highway 50 as of this point. And certainly outside of the previous fire perimeter. That's one thing that we always look at on this map, is you don't want to be seeing those dots showing up outside of the previous fire perimeter, because that means it's actively spreading. Now, tying this into the evacuation map, if you're wondering why it's warnings up here and orders here, even though some of those areas look like they would be closer to the fire, I believe the reasoning for that is when you look at the fuels. So if you look at that dark green color, that's where you have very thick forest in many cases. It's a lot of dead trees that were killed by bark beetles, disease, and have been critically stressed by the drought as well. All kinds of factors going on there. But you notice, as you get to the more northern part of this fire, you transition out of those trees and into this rockier terrain as you get into the higher elevations. So that should act to actually calm down the fire on that northern section. Now, where you see there's continuous fuels though, that's where the forest continues, that's where you still have a lot of dry fuels, and that's where the fire will have an easier path to continue to move forward. So I believe that is the explanation for why we have the warnings in that area, but then orders in an area that seems like it would be farther away from the fire. It's because we might have some protective, almost like a protective rock barrier protecting some of these places. But with that being said, and we've seen anything can happen on these wildfires that we're seeing as of right now. You can see that some of those hotspots are currently showing up where we do have that rocky terrain. So it's very important to definitely stay updated with those local resources on the ground. But I know we went over all the bad news, so now I think would be a brief time to try to look at some silver linings and any good news we could try to grasp right now, because the situation does look pretty critical both right now and into the next few days. But that I think is one aspect of good news, is where we see a lot of that activity, it should slow down on this northern section as it moves into that rockier terrain. Again, the bad news though is that it is continuous right there. The other area of good news when it comes to the Caldor Fire is we do still, I purposely just updated it right there, because every time we update this map, seems like we are getting more and more personnel on this fire. 25 helicopters, 329 engines, 77 dozers, 78 water tenders, and 3,500 personnel, 73 crews. And we've seen the work that, some of the amazing work that the wildland firefighters have been able to do throughout this last year, where I think the best example of this is Chester on the Dixie Fire. So this is, I think, where we can hopefully try to find some silver lining, is we do have a large amount of resources on the Caldor Fire, and those resources, as we've seen throughout the season, have the potential to do some pretty amazing things. I think one of the best examples of that is on the Dixie Fire, where if we turn on the fire perimeter, you can see Chester's right here. This fire came all the way around that community, and they basically stopped the fire in its tracks, saving what I imagine is thousands of structures right there. We also saw this in the Janesville area. Again, on this spot fire that started, we did end up getting some structures destroyed in this area, but they had a lot of resources ready. They had 5 strike teams deployed into this as the second that spot fire started to move into Janesville. And we had continued winds pushing from the south, trying to get that spot fire farther into where you see thousands of structures up there. And they were able to stop that in its tracks. So we have seen some of the amazing work that our firefighters can do. We have about 3,500 of them on the Caldor Fire right now. So that, I think, is where some of the possible silver lining and good news can come in on the Caldor Fire. But again, we're kind of, I believe the term is grasping at straws there, because the situation certainly doesn't look good right now, and it looks like it's going to be critical over the next couple of days, especially as those winds pick up in the afternoon hours. Now, we got started looking at some of these live images And I just want to see if we can see any from a different perspective here. So it's better to look at it from the hybrid map. Interested to see if this camera would show anything. This looks like it would be almost directly where the fire is right now. So just looking at where this camera is, see if we could zoom in here. So it looks like it's actually looking directly at Strawberry. So this is going to be a great camera to look at. We'll do the last 3 hours, and then if it looks like there's been any huge increases in the last 15 minutes, we can focus just on that time period. Oh, wow. So this is exactly what we did not want to see. Alright, it's a little confusing at first there, because it looked like that was just active fire going on and some torching in those trees at first. But on second look, yeah, so at first that actually looks like it's flames. Let me know in the comments what you think. But so at first I thought that was flames, but just looking at the smoke right here, it looks like where you maybe have lighter areas of smoke, that's actually the sunlight breaking through. And I'm interested to see if this is facing west. Because, yeah, so this camera is facing actually directly west. So you can imagine this is probably pointed pretty close to the sun at this point. So I believe that's actually sunlight breaking through where there's maybe some lighter areas in the smoke. I wanted to clear that up. Let me know if you disagree in the live chat, because I've never actually seen something like this before, so I'm kind of just going off the cuff right here. But at first, it does look like that's all flames, but on second thought, I believe that's maybe the fact that the camera is pointed directly at where the sun is, and then that sun is being able to break through where the smoke is a bit on the lighter side, just giving the illusion that that was all flames. But yeah, so we've had some trouble with our cameras throughout this entire video. Oh, this is the Sierra at Tahoe cam, if you are interested in. Wow, so certainly large amount of smoke in this area. This is definitely a camera that we're going to have to keep updating, as well as that leak springs. It really shows how much the fire has grown over the last couple of days. Or in the last couple of hours, I meant to say. Because, just going back through there. Because a couple of days ago, I believe all these cameras were totally fine. And in some of these situations, it looks like they're starting to get into some of, at least on the leak springs camera, we're actually seeing flames in the camera view itself. So it looks like the camera is kind of dying down right there. Hopefully the camera itself hasn't died. Yeah, interesting. So it says another time lapse there. You know what it probably is? It's probably so many people using this website right now that the website is currently freaking out. So we'll take another look at this one. This is the one actually looking from the southwest, looking up at the fire. Thank you very much, Crosswave, for the super chat. See, Heavenly Cam 2. So that's one of the key reasons that I transitioned from doing these updates where I wonder if it's Ski Area 2. I think that's what you're referencing there. In the past, I used to just research these fires for about 1 or 2 hours, and then I would figure out everything, all the most recent information that was going on, and then I would just present all the information in as concise a format as I possibly could. But this season, I've actually had to change things up because throughout the Dixie Fire, throughout the Caldor Fire, as we're seeing right now, situation can change so rapidly. So I think this is one of those spinning cameras. Let's see if it's gotten better in the last hour, if it maybe stops spinning. So what I was saying is I had to almost change up the format for how I do these videos because they change so that, not exactly what we're looking at, but that is an interesting thing to see is how dry all those fuels look in this area. Man, this website is freaking out right now. Sorry for the brief delay. Yeah, that one keeps spinning around. One thing does kind of give us a wide circle view of exactly what's going on though, so I guess that's one thing to think about. Gonna try the other heavenly cam to see if that one's not spinning. So this one, you can see where that camera is right there. It's looking like it's looking down towards the southwest at this point. And while we're loading that one up, I can just show this other camera. This is, I believe Mark called this Echo Summit. It was showing the flames coming over the ridge line as of right now. And this also paints the picture of what we've been talking about throughout the entire course of this video, is that the fire activity has certainly picked up over the last couple of hours. You can see a lot of activity going on right there. And what I notice in this imagery is that lots of fuels in this area. The one good thing I'll say is that if this starts to move down this hill, it'll start to actually slow down because fires move much faster uphill than they do downhill. I'm also going to close that link out. Might help things go faster. And then the other thing that I always point out on this is those aren't actually flame links. I know this just because of the way the camera works and the coloring. It makes it look like that's all flame right there, but it's really just picking up the heat of the air that has come off of the fire. So you're not actually seeing flame heights of 3,000 feet right there. A lot of that is just the superheated air above where the fire is active, but it makes it, in some cases, look a lot worse than it is, which is one reason that I actually used to not show this imagery. And man, I do not know what is going on with Alert Wildfire right now. It's possibly the worst time for it not to be working. Maybe it's just the beta website that's freaking out. We'll transition to the older version to see if it's looking better. I think the key one that we want to load up again was Leak Springs. That was the one where the fire actually looked like it was about to overrun the camera. So we'll look at 1 hour. So you can see some of that torching going on right there. This is the camera right down there. It looks, it's always better to have the hybrid map while it's loading. Looks like it's looking into almost over the Kirkwood area at that point. And then we'll also take a look at some of the other cams going on, because it certainly looks like there's some critical conditions going on with our other cameras. But you can see this one might actually potentially be overrun over the next couple of hours. So I do see that somebody says that they were on it a few hours ago and is doing the same thing. So looks like it's maybe not just me. So far we haven't had an error with the non-beta version of Alert Wildfire. So hopefully it was just the beta version that was freaking out. That's a good thing to know if you're currently trying to pull up some of these cameras yourselves. But lots of activity going on right there. Two things that I could maybe say is the silver lining on this is, one, you notice there's a lot less, if we're worried about losing this camera and whatever infrastructure is down here. One is that there's a lot less fuels right around this camera. I don't know if they purposely did that or just the nature of a ridge line right there having rockier terrain, but that would slow the fire down as it moves closer to the camera. The other thing is, you notice there are some people in this imagery as well, which gives you the idea that it's not critically out of control yet. So I do see, has the fire reached Lake Tahoe? So that's actually something that we should look at. So Caldor Fire gave their update at 5 o'clock. And this is, I think, a good trick for everybody to know. So Caldor Fire gave their update at 5 o'clock on their Facebook page right here. You can find that by going to Cal Fire Amador El Dorado unit and watching their update that they had. But that, again, was about an hour and a half ago. So that's where following these fires starts to get difficult, because you get the update from Cal Fire, and then a lot can happen in the next hour, hour and a half, possibly 3 hours, as we've seen throughout the satellite imagery. All that smoke that's being produced on the Caldor Fire right now, you can see it certainly looks like it's continuing to pick up in activity, and unfortunately, especially on that northeastern section right there. Looking at that another way, we can look at where the fire itself actually is, where you can see those hot spots coming off of it. One thing you'll notice is that once this reloads is that it was calmer this morning, and then throughout the last couple hours you'll notice this northeastern section just turn bright red and then start moving farther towards the northeast. So that's where you get in one of these situations where it's difficult to find out exactly what's going on, because the update was about an hour and a half ago. And then the thing that we always use, the best resource we have of right now, is these active hotspot maps, where you can see it. I believe it tries to match up where that heat signature is showing up on that map and then interpolate it onto this map right here showing up as those heat signatures. But one thing that we've seen time and time again is that these heat signatures can be off by as much as a mile in some cases. So I'm certainly not saying that it's directly over these structures right now, but I would say that is something that we certainly are worried about. So if all other resources fail, if you haven't gotten an update in a couple of hours, if the hotspot map looks like there is a very critical situation going on right now, where based on this map, it looks like it started to push into the South Lake Tahoe area, but you also can't 100% trust this map because it's a satellite picking up hotspots from space. So imagine how difficult that is. There is going to be a pretty large margin of error there. So the next best place that I've always found to find the most recent wildfire information is actually Twitter. And I know Twitter has its distractions, so what I do is literally only follow wildfire accounts and weather accounts as well. So we might see some information on Hurricane Ida as we're looking at this as well. So basically, as I scroll through my feed, it's just going to be a rundown of the most important things that we need to know about what's actually going on the ground since that Caldor Fire update that happened about 2 hours ago. So this is a great account to follow. Zeke Lunder, he says, Caldor Fire mandatory evacuations for Myers and Christmas Valley, updated maps, and some thoughts on why we will be unlikely to hold this fire at Echo Summit. So I believe we were actually looking at the Echo Summit camera. That was the Echo Summit camera right there. I'm also going to close Alert Wildfire down until we need it again. That's another trick you can use, is Alert Wildfire takes up a lot of your computer power. So if your computer is running slowly, that's always a good one to close out first. That right there is, at least according to Mark in the live chat, is Echo Summit right there, where you can see the fire has reached the ridge line right there. And it's hard to tell in this imagery, but it does look like it's fairly continuous fuels throughout this entire area. Although I will say that as it moves down this side, the fire should slow down somewhat, because fires do, just given their nature, move slower downhill because they're not able to preheat the fuels. But back to Twitter, because that is the best place to get the most recent information about what's going on. So I believe that's Hurricane Ida. So this is actually, we'll just go through this account because CA Fire Scanner, I think that's probably my favorite account on Twitter to follow, especially when it comes to these wildfires, because about 1 minute ago he says, extra resources being requested into Division 1 on northeastern side of the fire to assist with structure protection, approximately 100 cabins with fire behind them per radio traffic, resources being sent from other divisions. So Division 1 on northeastern side of the fire. Let's see if we can see what Division 1 is. I believe we had... So I think InciWeb has the Caldor Fire maps. I mean, we pretty much have an idea of what section of the fire he's talking about. He's most likely talking about that northeastern section of the fire that we've seen taking off over the last couple of hours. But just to be sure, we'll go to Caldor Fire, we'll check out the recent maps, and we'll be able to look at what division he's actually talking about, where they've redeployed or deployed some of the new resources. This should show the divisions on it. While this map is loading, I'll comment to what somebody just said in the live chat. I would recommend, if anyone is interested about fires, make a Twitter account just for fire weather. I did that, and it's a blessing. No more distractions from friends posting just fire weather. That is actually great advice, because that's the exact same thing I did as well. And I follow about 100 fire weather accounts, as well as some other weather accounts as well. And it is a very good place to get the most recent information. And especially in one of these situations that's changing by the minute in some situations. And that's actually what we're doing right now. We saw this tweet where he says, this is probably the first account that you should follow if you do make an account for following fire weather, is approximately 100 cabins with fire behind them per radio traffic, extra resources being requested into Division 1. If we want to see what Division 1 is, it looks like it's right there. It's that area that is to the north of Highway 50. So it's concerning to hear that, because what we were hoping was that, you notice that area north of Highway 50 there is where you start getting into some rockier terrain. So what we were hoping was that was going to calm some of the fire activity down up there. But you do see that there are areas north of Highway 50 where you do see that continuous green color where there's still lots of fuels. And it does look like fire activity has picked up in that area, and it is starting to threaten some more structures. So some extra resources being requested into there, as 100 cabins are currently threatened. So looking at this visual reference of the fire below with all the 4 main areas of activity that were covered in the meeting identified on the map. Caution hotspots are hours old, can be vague and erroneous. And 1 second, I'm just going to close my door real quick. Sounds like somebody's outside. So, firestorm near Camp Sacramento as fire crossed Highway 50 from south to north, significant property damage. So, that is kind of the first confirmation that we've had throughout this entire report. Again, our biggest concern throughout this entire report was the fact that we're seeing these hotspots move closer and closer towards South Lake Tahoe. The reason that's so critical, you can see with those orange dots, that's all the structures in the area. So our major concern is the fact that as of right now, it looks like the satellite imagery is picking up hotspots where we see such a large amount of structures. And what we were hoping was that this was one of those situations where just the map is wrong, the satellite is wrong, and in this case, a lot would have to be wrong for this to be completely wrong. But that is our first confirmation that the fire has moved into some of these communities, and we actually are seeing some structures destroyed as a result of that. Let's see if it will replay here. Yeah, so that's our first confirmation that we are, due to the pickup in activity that we've had over the last few hours, unfortunately we are seeing some structures destroyed, and it looks like more structures are currently being threatened. So from the conference, Division D still has a 100 to 200 acre piece of fire that keeps slopping. So I think that's mostly going to be talking about. Any tweets older than that are going to be talking about old information that was from the Caldor Fire. So that is where we have to grasp on some of the good news. We do have a lot of resources on this fire. We said 3,500 personnel, and you can imagine they are working as hard as they possibly can on both structured defense right now and getting people to safety, because that is something that I should show once again, is the current evacuation map. If you live in this area, that's probably the first thing you should do. You should just exit out of this YouTube channel right now. Check the most recent evacuation orders and warnings. I want to make sure this map is updated. So best ways to do that, you can find this link in the description of this video. You can also go to Cal Fire. Cal Fire's website, InstaWeb website, usually has some very quick updates. And then you can also go to the Caldor Fire Facebook page, which is Cal Fire Amador El Dorado Unit, to get all that recent evacuation information. This is what the map looks like as of right now. Looks like we do have some new evacuation orders in place in this northeastern section. And let's see if the map is working yet. No, it's still not populating with its information, so that's unfortunate there. But there are a number of different places to get this kind of information, so that should always be the first thing that you look towards when it comes to trying to get the updates on these fires. And thank you very much, John, for the super chat. And again, that did also just remind me I haven't been doing a great job of looking at the live chat, so apologies if anybody has been posting any questions or concerns. But right now, we're basically trying to figure out what the most recent information is, and I normally don't just scroll through my Twitter, but I basically only follow Twitter, or I only follow wildfire accounts, and it seems like a lot has changed since Caldor's update an hour or 2 hours ago. So we're just trying to figure out exactly what's going on the ground right now. So that's where some new evacuation orders being put in place as of 4:50 p.m. Mandatory evacuations for Myers and Christmas Valley. And then that's where he said unlikely to hold this fire at Echo Summit. We were actually looking at the Echo Summit cam where, yeah, it paints the picture why they're unlikely to hold it. Large amount of activity going on right there. And really unfortunate just to see how much activity going on the Caldor Fire. See PyroQ visible from Truckee. That's another great account to follow, Neil LaRoe. He's a wildfire researcher. I've actually gotten to go to a couple wildfires with him to study plume dynamics and how that then impacts the wildfire. But I do want to check back in on some of those cameras that we're looking at, because there was a couple of cameras, and in particular that one that looked like it was looking over Strawberry, because the last time we looked at that one, so Hawkins Peak, that looks like it's, so Leak Springs, this camera looked like it was getting close to possibly burning over at one point when we were looking at it. And then we're going to try to find that camera we were looking at again that was looking directly over Strawberry, because I think that was the most critical camera that we've looked at so far. And then, you know, just to also try to get an idea of exactly what's going on the ground, I can also pull up the fire scanner. Again, I haven't used the fire scanner yet, because a lot of times it can just be a lot of white noise and it ends up actually being more of a distraction than it is actually helpful. But In a situation like we're seeing right now, that's where you do want to have that most recent information from directly on the ground. So I'm just going to look for that for 1 second. Again, we can take a look at that map in the meantime. Oh, that's why I couldn't find it. It's called Police Scanner, not Fire Scanner. Alright, I should be able to pull up the actual Caldor Fire feed in a second to try to hear exactly what's going on the ground.
3 County Hotel, where you at? 3 inbound, number 3 behind the scoopers. Yep, you're clear to target. 3 Charlie, let's go. Zero Bravo, Romeo's off Hell Base, requesting permission into TFR. Can you repeat your intention? Roger that. Recon mission want to go direct down to Happy Valley Road and Antelope Mountain area to start, and then follow fire line down around the south. All right, what divisions are those? Got a little bit of retardant on it. Just caution that for the guys. Sorry about that. Delta. Can I bring you in at 5,000? Roger that. Climb to 5,000 this time. A copy, you'll take the Blount route, and then AirTac or Helco will bump up to 55. You'll have 5,000. Copters are working 4,500 below. Altimeter 3002. 3002 will go to North Helco for further, and up to 5,000 at this time. 0 Bravo Romeo. Firm break, AirTac Helco.
So one thing I will say that we did just hear on the fire scanner is it does sound like they're able to use some air attack right now. So that's kind of the good news and the bad news of the fact that those winds today cleared out a lot of that smoke that we were seeing. The good news is that when you have increased visibility, you're able to actually use some of those helicopters and aircraft that we were talking about. But the bad news is that with that smoke being moved out, we've certainly seen a large increase in fire activity, and that's been one of the big factors throughout the day today that has really picked up the fire behavior that we've been seeing. And also a big thank you to Lucy Hansen, not only for the super chat, but the awesome job that you always do at moderating. Helps keep this live chat informative and helpful, which is very, very necessary in a time right now. And apologies also that we haven't spent too much time on the Dixie Fire yet. It does look like there is a large increase in activity going on in the Dixie Fire as well, but we're continuing to focus on the Caldor Fire just because you can see how much it's picked up over the last couple of hours, and it looks like this is developing into one of those critical situations where exactly what we did not want to happen seems to be going down, where the fire has pushed a number of miles to the northeast throughout the day today. Just looking at where the fire perimeter was yesterday, where those hotspots were, where we're actively picking up the hotspots right now, if we were to measure that, in the Cal Fire update, they officially said that it's moved 2.5 miles today, but we've seen a lot of activity over the last 2 hours since that update happened, and based on the hotspots, it's saying it moved about 5 miles, but that is also where I'll say again that this map isn't always perfect, so you can sometimes take it with a grain of salt. But it was actually great to hear that they have been able to use some air resources. So 2 ways we could try to see those air resources. One, we can actually look at the cameras. This is the Armstrong Lookout 2. And I don't know if you look very closely, I was able to see it. You're able to actually, I'll go back just in case you missed it. It happens fast. You can actually see some of those aircraft, like helicopters and hopefully planes as well, being able to fly into this fire, drop some retardant, and hopefully help the situation. It actually helped where it froze right there. I believe we could see a plane on that left side of the imagery. So good to hear that we are actually able to use aircraft, but overall, I would say the smoke clearing out throughout the day today has been a bad thing, because over the last few days we had that thick smoke layer, and that was actually keeping our conditions calmer because it kept our temperatures cooler, kept our winds calmer as well. And then as a lot of that smoke cleared out today, you can just see it on the camera that you can actually see things now. In the past few days, all you could really see was smoke in the imagery, but that paints a pretty good picture of the increase in activity that we've had throughout the day today. Haven't seen many cameras so far this season where you see that much energy just going into the atmosphere. You can think of how much fuel you have down right there that must be burning in order to create that wide of a smoke plume. I think even more than how high it's going, the fact that it is going out of the camera's view, it's going so high, I think even more, you'd say, out of the ordinary is just how wide that seems as well. It just looks like that entire ridge line seems to be actively burning at this point. And if anybody knows in the live chat exactly what ridge line that is, I'd be interested to know. I wonder if it almost matches up with this imagery where we're also looking at that fire activity going right along a ridge line, where you also see a lot of that heat rising up into the atmosphere. So interested to see some of the other cameras. There was So we looked at the Heavenly one, lots of smoke in that area. Going to have to continue to watch that. I think this was the one that, if we back out and look at where this camera is looking, let's turn on hybrid map so we can get the city names, really get an idea of what we're looking at here. I'll make this bigger. So, looks like this camera, zoom in here. So this camera right here is looking directly at the Sierra at Tahoe Resort. In the far distance, we have Twin Bridges and Strawberry. So I'll remind you that late last night, we did see that fire activity move into Strawberry. About as of 6 hours ago, they had said that they had some pretty successful structure protection in Strawberry last night. They said they'd done a pretty successful job of keeping that fire actually from burning any of the structures in there. But as we were seeing when we scrolled through Twitter, certainly looks like we're seeing more structures being destroyed as of right now. I can't confirm that those videos actually were from Strawberry, but can confirm that with this northeastern push that we're seeing on the Caldor Fire over the last couple of hours, we have had some structures destroyed. So that's the camera. That's where it's looking. So now let's actually see what it looks like on this imagery. And you can tell it's a ski resort because you can actually see the lift itself. We'll go last 3 hours, try to get the overall view of what. It's almost a shame there's so much smoke because I'd love to be able to see exactly what's going on in Strawberry right now, because that is one of the areas that we are the most concerned about. So Big Hill shows the Echo Summit cloud top. We'll have to check that out. That would match up with the infrared cam that we're looking at. But yeah, it certainly looks like very. You notice that based on where this camera is and where the fire is burning, a lot of the smoke from that fire off in the distance here, you can see it's being carried by the winds directly over this camera. So that's why it looks like there's so much smoke in this area. Looks like, and it also, I know it can be a little deceiving because when you see it, the really bright colors there, it can almost look like that's the flame itself, but I believe that's just because the camera is pointed directly west. You can think of the sun setting right now. So I believe that's actually just the sun poking through where the smoke is a bit lighter. Not actually flame activity that we're seeing there when that happens, but certainly seeing a lot of smoke in that area. So the camera that somebody just recommended was Big Hill. So right there. Yeah, so seeing a pyrocumulus cloud, let's go 1 hour. And we'll be able to match that up with the infrared imagery. While that's loading, we can look at the other view of Echo Summit. This is the infrared imagery that's going on right now. You can see that fire has reached the ridgeline on Echo Summit. And it's basically looked like this for the last maybe hour and a half since we first started looking at this camera. So fire activity, even though it should be starting to calm down as you get to 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, unfortunately, something that we've been seeing on all of our wildfires this season that's been very out of the ordinary is how extreme they'll continue to be even into the overnight hours and even once it's fully dark out. And in some cases, it's actually more active at 8 p.m. than it is at 4 p.m. And usually 4 p.m. would be the most active part of the fire season or fire day because that's when it's the hottest, the driest, and the windiest. But what we've been seeing with a lot of our fires this year is that throughout most of the early parts of the day, you actually have a thick smoke inversion over the fires, and that keeps the activity down. And then around 5 or 6 o'clock, it breaks through that inversion like you're seeing on the Caldor Fire. And then once that happens, it just takes off from there. So that's certainly what we've been seeing throughout the day today. Lots of activity going on. And if we now want to match up that infrared imagery with the view itself from on the ground, yeah, you can see the large pyrocumulus cloud coming off of that. This is looking at an hour time lapse of Echo Summit. Whenever you see that kind of white puffy cloud look to the smoke, that's what you call a pyrocumulus cloud. First thing that I always think about when I see one of those is that for that to happen, you have to have a lot of energy rising up here. You have to have fairly extreme fire behavior. And then I think most importantly though is in order for all, you think about with all that rising air, it's not just going to create a vacuum at the surface where there's no more air. So that's where you actually start getting some winds rushing in to replace that air that's been rising. And that's where you can start to get some very gusty, erratic fire behavior where it leads to faster fire spread and certainly makes fire suppression very difficult. Oh, interesting. So somebody said the Heavenly Cam 1 hour time lapse shows a dramatic wind shift. You should take a look, Holt. So thank you very much for the recommendation. Let's check it out. Also, apologies if I've been missing anybody's comments in the live chat. I'm not the best at looking at maps, talking about maps, and reading a live chat at the same time. So apologies if I've missed anybody's questions so far. Let's go 3 hours. Hopefully that's long enough to be able to see the wind shift. So right there, you can see clearly wind. Looks like it's funneling in this canyon right here. Certainly pushing the smoke. You also just look at how much smoke is being produced right now. Tells you how much fire activity we're seeing and kind of matches up with, wow. Oh, there's that wind shift. Wow, great recommendation. Who commented that? Aloha Milton. That was a great recommendation. And I wonder if that ties in exactly to what we were just saying, where when you start getting a lot of rising air, then that starts leading to a lot of erratic, gusty winds around where that rising air is happening. So let's just play that again, because that was pretty amazing live cam to look at. And the biggest thing I think about when it comes to shifting winds like that is just the difficulty that gives firefighters, because you might have to rapidly update your strategy and plan depending on the way the winds are going. And you can see earlier in that imagery, the winds are all coming almost towards the far right of the image here. It looks like they're almost being pushed right along this, what looks to be a kind of drainage right there. And then you'll see these winds shift at about a 90-degree angle. They start going the exact other direction. So that was actually perfect timing for you to recommend to look at that, because we were just talking about how when you get all that rising motion, that's where you can get some erratic, gusty wind shifts. And also in the meantime, thank you. I saw Mike posted a super chat, so thank you very much for the support, Mike. And I'll try to keep... Yeah, so somebody says, might be the fire starting to suck the air in locally. So, yeah, that's what we were talking about. And actually, now would be a good time. I'm going to close some tabs so that we can actually load this simulation, because it often requires a fair bit of computer power to run this. I'm going to close that. We'll close that. I doubt they're going to have any damage assessment teams come back with information today. I imagine right now they're 100% focused on structure protection and getting everybody out to safety. But what I want to show, and why I just closed out a lot of those tabs, is the Wharf S-Fire wildfire simulation. This is... actually, before I start talking, I'm going to make sure I get it loaded up so that while it's loading, I can describe what it is. So we're going to go to domain 3. We're going to turn on the fire perimeter, wind vectors, radiative power. Alright, so what this is it's basically one of the top wildfire simulations in the world. We run this out of the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory, and what it does is it combines the fire perimeter and where we have those active hotspots with the fuel, weather, and topography variables. And then what really sets this fire apart is that, or sets this model apart, is that it's able to actually predict how the wildfire is going to create its own weather, and then how that weather is then going to impact the wildfire. So that's something we were just talking about how when you get a hot spot like we're seeing on this northeast, oh man, so you could just see as I was talking there, that updated to where you see that bright red color. That's where it's much stronger activity. And then we also saw a couple new squares pop up in there too. So that was exactly what we didn't want to see on that map. So we are going to have to come back to this and focus on that again in a second. But what I was saying is when you get all that heat like that, you get that rising air. So then you get winds coming in from all different directions, which then impacts the wildfire and what the wildfire ends up doing, which then impacts the future winds. So this is one of the few models in the world that's actually able to take all of that into account and then actually creates a prediction for where the fire is going to burn over the next 2 days. So you can see that first we're going to be looking at the 29th. So we're going to be able to see what this fire was predicting for the day today. And then I'm almost scared to show it, but we're then also going to be able to see what this wildfire simulation is showing for the day tomorrow, when we have even more critical conditions coming in with warm temperatures, dry air relative humidity in the low teens to possibly even single digits, but even more importantly, those strong winds that we're going to have from the southwest that will unfortunately lead to more growth on the northeastern section of the fire. So I think there's probably 3 key areas I'm watching on this. I'm watching this area on this western finger where they've been talking about they've been having a very hard time on this western finger recently. It's basically they have dozer lines in place, but the fire just keeps jumping those dozer lines, and that is an area of the fire where we still have a large amount of unburnt fuels and structures in that area. So I'm going to watch that spot closely on the simulation. I'm also going to watch this area of the fire very closely because that's a spot where we're seeing a lot of activity right now. And with those southwesterly winds that we're going to have tomorrow, even over the next couple of hours, I'm starting to be more concerned about all of these orange dots that you see around here, the structures. Let me know in the live chat if that is Kirkwood that we're looking at right there. It's a little hard to tell based on this map. See if we zoom in there. But so that's an area of the fire that I'm going to be watching, but number 1 priority is that northeastern section. So right before I play this, I will remind you that it is an experimental forecast only, doesn't take into account fire suppression tactics. But so with that being said, sometimes you can take it with a grain of salt, but it is going to be interesting what it was predicting throughout the day today, because I would say what ended up happening today was not what we were expecting. Much more activity. Actually, the model looks like it was pretty spot on. So this is now getting into, I'm going to pause it, that's about 11 p.m. tonight. It's at least spot on in the areas where it's showing the most activity. Going back to the beginning and then to the end of today, you can see it is predicting where it has that western finger that we were talking about, that area on the southeastern edge, and then also that area to the northeast. That's where it is predicting the most fire activity. It'd be interesting if we could zoom in here to see. So this model did have the fire going past Strawberry, which looks like it easily matches up with the hotspots that we're seeing right now. If anything, I would say that the model under-predicted fire behavior throughout the day today, which I would say isn't a surprise, because what we saw today, I don't think anybody was expecting it to be as bad as it has over the last 4 or 5 hours. Now we're going to be getting into the overnight hours, and you can see it's still predicting those southerly winds that are pushing that fire continually to the north, even overnight. So just in case you missed that, that's a pretty important point to make. So we'll go back to 12 o'clock tonight. Oh, also, that's the time and the clock that we're looking at. So we're going to go to 12 o'clock tonight, because what we'd like to see is that fire activity, and in particularly on this northeastern section, to calm down throughout the overnight hours. Usually that is what happens on wildfires, where at 3 or 4 in the morning you drop into the 50s or 60s, relative humidity picks up, the winds die down, and your fire behavior calms down. But looking at the wildfire simulation, it looks like even as we get into 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., we're still seeing those same southerly winds continuing to push this fire farther towards the northeast, which is exactly what we don't want to see. Now, I'll just pause it again, because this is going to be right before the winds really start to pick up tomorrow. Actually, it looks like it's while the winds are picking up tomorrow. If we go back, it looks like some of those vectors are smaller at about 9 a.m. in the morning. And then over the next few hours, you're going to start to see those strong winds come in. And that's what it's predicting for tomorrow, even more growth on that northeastern section, which is pretty much the top thing that we've been talking about throughout the entire course of this video. It's how the fire weather, the winds, most importantly the wind direction, interacts with where the fire ends up going. So just backing up here, one thing I always find useful to do on this model is just to go back to the beginning, see where the fire perimeter was yesterday, then go to the end, see where it's predicting fire activity, and then just go back and forth, and then think about it. So looking at the end here, I would say that it's over predicting activity on this western edge. I think there is the potential for that southern area of that western finger to really start to take off into those unburnt fuels, and with some of the winds that we have tomorrow picking up, that will certainly be a danger, especially combined with the fact that the Cal Fire said that was an area that was continually seeing problems. But I would be surprised to see all of that growth on the northern edge of that finger right there. I want to check and see if that's an area that's contained yet. No, so that whole finger right there, again, a finger, I haven't described this yet. A finger is basically just, it almost looks like a finger extending out from the fire. So pretty self-explanatory term, but where you see that red line, that is where the Caldor Fire is uncontained. So we are still uncontained on that northern section, but I think the model's over predicting the growth and that over the next 24 hours. But where it might even be, I hate to say it, but under predicting is on the northeastern section. Just based on what we've seen throughout the day today, we might actually already be past where the model was predicting for the next 2 days. So if we could zoom, we can actually try to answer that question. So you can see this is predicting that the fire by the end of tomorrow would be reaching Lower Echo Lake. And again, you can always take this model take this model with a grain of salt because it is an experimental forecast only. But, and I already forgot the name of the lake. Looking at Lower Echo Lake. Now let's go to where the active hotspots are right now. Lower Echo Lake. Yeah, so that pretty much confirms exactly what we did not want to see. Is that you can see the lake, right? Not sure why that happened. That's the Lower Echo Lake right there, where that's what the model was predicting was as far as the fire was going to get by the end of the day tomorrow. And we're actually already seeing that area underneath those current hotspots that we have on the Caldor Fire right now. So that basically paints the picture of how intense the fire activity has been throughout the day today, is because in the past, this model was over predicting fire behavior on the Caldor Fire. And that was what I was going to hope to be the case, but you can see that over the last few hours, the fire itself has outperformed basically what anybody was thinking was going to happen. And that's something that I did hear a Cal Fire representative talking about. That has been one of the big challenges this year, is because the fuels are the driest they've ever been. We're in the midst of, I think 90% of California is in the extreme drought category. And to build a model like this, or some of the other models that Cal Fire uses to station resources and plan strategy, you have to use old fires to train the model and to be able to show it how to behave in wildfires. And what the Cal Fire representative was saying is, we're seeing conditions this year that are so far more critical than anything that we saw in the past, that these models that were trained on fires in the past actually aren't able to keep up with what is actually happening, because what's actually happening is so different than what we were seeing in the past. And I believe that is a perfect example of it, looking at where the fire was where the model was predicting would be by the end of tomorrow, where tomorrow is supposed to be actually the largest day, and then where the fire actually is as of right now. And also to keep in mind that, again, because I don't want to purposely scare anybody. Again, when you look at this hotspot map, it looks like every single one of those orange dots where you have those structures makes it look like every single one of those structures has been overtaken by the fire. But I do just want to reiterate that this map isn't perfect. It's a satellite picking up heat signatures from space, so there's a large margin of error. It's also trying to break through a very thick smoke column right now to figure out where those hotspots are. So that can throw it off by, in some cases, we've even seen by a mile or two. So that is one thing to think about there. But when we were scrolling through Twitter, we were seeing some videos of structures currently being destroyed. And it certainly looks like the situation's a lot worse than we were hoping it would be today. This was, again, before the red flag warning goes into effect. That red flag warning that is covering the entire Caldor Fire is set to go into effect tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. to August 31st at 11 p.m. So we weren't even to the most critical part of the fire weather forecast yet, and we're already seeing this much activity. So I know I usually try to focus on the silver lining or some good news, but I think this is one of those update and forecasts where they're really, it's a very critical situation that we're looking at right now. And unfortunately, with those conditions coming in tomorrow causing that red flag warning, where we see the winds picking up to possibly 40 miles per hour from the southwest, which will just try to push that fire farther to the northeast, this is going to be something that we're going to have to watch very closely over the next couple of days at least. And again, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody in this area. And key thing to point out is that if you live in this area, it is very important to stay updated with all the local warnings and orders because as we've seen throughout the course of this live stream, I think I started it at about 4:45, and just in the course of this live stream, we've seen at least this hotspot map move farther and farther towards the northeast, and it seems like almost every time we come back to it, you see more of those squares pop up red. So very important to stay updated with your local resources. One other thing I will say is huge thank you to Jimmy for the super chat. And again, I remember you commenting in another live chat that your family was able to get out of an area safely. I believe it was the Dixie Fire in Janesville that you'd mentioned that. So again, so happy to hear that you and your family and friends were able to evacuate from the Dixie Fire safely. And I hope that as that area of the Dixie Fire has calmed down, that you've actually been able to move back in and that things are looking better there. But I think now, so right now I'm interested to see if they've updated the numbers. We actually haven't looked at that at all. We've just been looking at the fire behavior itself so much. Looks like it's about 156,000 acres. That is going to jump way up by the next time they update it, or even the next time they're able to map it, because certainly seeing a large amount of activity right now. Now I want to actually get another eyes on the ground, see if we've seen any updates in some of those key places that we've been looking at. So we'll load up a map. I think this one shows a lot of that extreme activity that we're seeing. Just looking at the satellite imagery, though, you can see how active the Caldor Fire has been over the last few hours. I would say one of the most active wildfire days that we've seen so far. And looking at that actually from the ground, just looking at this map right here, you can see where this camera is. It's looking up towards the northeast into the Kirkwood area. We'll let that load up for a second. In the meantime, it's been a while since I showed what I think is, what are the top 2 things to think about? So the top thing to think about is where those hotspots are right now, and the fact that it looks like they're over a large amount of those orange dots, which are the structures, and the fact that that is leading to some new evacuation orders and warnings. If you're in this area, that's the first thing that I would look out. And again, the difference here is if you're in that red color, that's a mandatory evacuation order, that where it says get out as of right now. That yellow color is where it is still a warning. And I imagine, based on what we're seeing happening right now, we're most likely going to be seeing more. So I'm just seeing, I got distracted here looking at the live chat. On InSweb, it's 168,000 acres. So that was exactly what I was talking about, how when I said the next time they update it, we're going to see it jump way up. So I do want to update that figure that I just put forward, because the figure I put forward wasn't correct. So Caldor Fire, yeah, looks like it's up to almost 170,000 acres as of an hour and 15 minutes ago. So can pretty much guarantee it's up to 170,000, maybe even more as of right now. 13% containment there. The summary is a good thing to look at too. Fire activity was limited overnight due to the inversion layer settling in. These fire conditions allowed crews to engage the fire directly. So that was where we still had favorable conditions over the Caldor Fire. That was where we had that thick smoke layer that was keeping our temperatures down, keeping our winds down, and keeping the fire behavior down. On that northeastern section, over the last few days, they were just saying it was growing about 0.5 miles per day. But then throughout the day today, you can see that, usually don't use terms like this, but it almost kind of looks like all hell's broken loose. You have the hot spots there from yesterday. Keep an eye on that spot right there. We'll try to measure how far it's gone. It'll be easier if we zoom in. So hotspots yesterday, live hotspots right now. Roughly maybe about that far. Looks like it's moved maybe 4 miles as of right now. Again, not totally sure that's accurate, just because this map can be off by quite a bit. But you can pretty much guarantee and say that there has been a massive increase in fire behavior throughout the day today, as instead of having that very thick smoke layer moderating our fire conditions, you can see throughout much of California we had clear conditions today, and that just allowed the fire to significantly pick up. And I wonder if they'll say that in this summary, or if this is an old summary. Short range spotting and group torching continue with the most active fire activity present in northeast and western sections of the fire. Steep terrain, ash pits, and fire-weakened trees continue to pose a threat for the fire crews throughout the fire. So, yeah, certainly they didn't mention it too much. They mention all the new evacuation orders popping up right there. And then when it comes to weather concerns, I think that's the other big thing to talk about on the Caldor Fire. Is interested to see what their forecast is for tonight. Whoa. Man, so that explains why the Warfest Fire wildfire simulation was predicting a lot of activity continuing overnight tonight, is because humidity recovery is expected to be poor at 22 to 27%, which is, in some cases, that's as dry as you see at 4 p.m. in the afternoon when it's the warmest time of the day. When you get that poor of a recovery, what that means is basically overnight. Way I can describe this, I believe I have an hourly forecast map somewhere in here. Because that's actually that might be the most critical thing that we've seen when it comes to what's going to be happening over the next 12 hours, is what they just mentioned on that report right there. It says humidity recovery is expected to be poor at 22 to 27%. So this is actually the forecast for the Dixie Fire. but I'm just trying to illustrate a point here. So at nighttime, you see that humidity line right there? What you'd like to see is it to go up to about 60 or 70% and really calm your fire behavior down. But what they're saying in that Caldor Fire update is that it's going to remain below 30% even overnight, which means that the fire activity is going to continue overnight as well. So that has big impacts for this whole area, where we would like to see, as the sun drops, the temperatures drop, we would like to see that fire activity gone down. But given that poor recovery, there will likely be some active activity overnight, and they'll most likely be doing structure protection and evacuations throughout the entire night tonight. Oh, that's a good point. Somebody said, your maps are impossible to read. Most viewers don't know. So I will try to do a better job of explaining exactly what we are looking at. So again, just this is basically the key frame to understand right here. It'll actually be easier if I zoom out. So Caldor Fire's right there. We've had some activity on that western edge there, on that southeastern edge, but most importantly on that northeastern edge. The reason that northeastern edge is so important, you can see there's Lake Tahoe up there. There's that northeastern section where you can see those hot spots where they were yesterday. Then if we turn on structures, that paints the picture of why this is the key area to look at. Where those orange dots are, that shows where the structures are. And the reason we've been following, again, apologies if anybody's interested about the other fires, but given what's going on the Caldor Fire right now, we've been mostly just focused on this area. And this is the reason. You can see all those structures right there. You can see the northeastern area of the fire where it was yesterday. And then if you look at the live hotspots, you can see where that fire has grown over the last 24 hours, but really in the last 6 hours, this fire has really started to take off. You could see that in the satellite imagery, where earlier today, just gonna take a quick sip of water. So earlier today, starting to lose my voice, which is a bummer because I have a bad feeling that we're going to be needing some long updates and forecasts over the next 2 nights as well, once that wind event comes in, bringing 40-mile-per-hour winds with it. But looking at what happened throughout the day today, you can see how it really started to pick up in activity. And the point I was trying to connect this to earlier was that because humidity, or the air, is going to be very dry overnight, it means that we're going to continue to see that activity that we've been following over the last few hours. We're going to see that continue overnight as well. So key thing to think about there if you live in this area, to stay updated with all those local evacuation warnings and orders. Now, the other point that I was trying to make, and I kind of just teased it, saying that, I hate to say it, but we're going to have some very long updates and forecasts over the next 2 days on the Caldor Fire, is when it comes to the weather forecast. So you can see that one thing I'll say about these hotspots over these structures, a lot of times this hotspot map will be about, maybe we've seen up to 1 mile to 2 miles off. So, and not everything under here has burned. So it certainly shows that activity has picked up in this area, and it's something to worry about, but I'm certainly not saying that every one of those orange dots right there has been taken over by the Caldor Fire. But where the big concern comes in is that no matter where those hotspots actually are, that's the general area of where there is a lot of fire activity. You can see the general area of where we have all those thousands of structures, especially on the south shore of Lake Tahoe. So the last thing we'd want to see is strong southwesterly winds coming in. And if we look at the wind forecast for the next few days, Monday afternoon, on this exact area where we don't want to see those southwesterly winds. You can see it's forecasting some winds up to 35 miles per hour tomorrow. Some places like drainages and canyons will most likely be around 40 miles per hour. And then Tuesday, the winds are actually picking up even more, getting around 40 miles per hour, which means that some of those drainages and canyons might actually be around 45 to 50. So just looking, just your zoom, it's a blur. Oh yeah, it does look kind of blurry. I'm seeing it on my other screen. I can also close out some of the other tabs. I have like 50 open right now, which is probably a bit unnecessary. So that, I think, is the key thing to think about moving forward on the Caldor Fire. One is what's going on right now, is it looks like those hotspots have moved into where we have a lot of these structures, which has big impacts on all our evacuation orders and warnings. Again, I haven't updated this map in maybe an hour, so we might actually have some new evacuation orders and warnings that have been put in place in the last hour. And then the big thing moving forward over the next couple of days is we have a wind event coming in, bringing some winds up to 40 to 45 miles per hour coming from the southwest that, I hate to say it, is just going to take where we have all that activity on the Caldor Fire right now and continue to move it farther up towards the northeast, where we see all those thousands of structures around Lake Tahoe. Now, one area that I haven't focused on very much in this video, but is also something to think about, correct me if I'm wrong in the live chat, but I believe that's Kirkwood there, and that's no matter what it is, it's some kind of community where we have a large amount of structures there. Really wish this map labeled cities. Yeah, not seeing an option for it. But you also notice lots of activity going on this more eastern edge of the fire. So that's also going to be an area to watch tomorrow as those southwesterly winds try to push that hotspot up to some of these communities as well. But key thing to look at right now where we see how much it's grown to the northeast. Now, I do also see that, oh, that's why the computer's going so slow. I still had the Wharf S Fire simulation model open, so I will close that out. If you missed that, I believe when I'm live you can click back into the video to see that simulation. Basically, what that simulation showed was that the activity that we've seen today outpaced what one of the top wildfire simulations in the world was predicting was going to burn for the next 2 days. So it shows that some of the unprecedented conditions that we had throughout the day today, lots of different reasons for that. I think the three really big factors that all kind of played together today was, one, we saw the smoke clear out. The last few days we had that thick smoke inversion that was keeping our fire behavior down. You can see it was a lot clearer throughout much of the day today, so that allowed warmer temperatures to come in. And then with those warmer temperatures, we got drier air, lower relative humidity, which just continues to increase fire activity as well. And then we also have, just based on the last months and even the last decade, we have some critically dry fuels in this area as well. About 85% of the state's in extreme drought conditions, including this area. So lots of different factors came together today to lead to much more activity than we're expecting to see. And then the big concern moving forward, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the fire weather forecast for tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday is actually even worse than the forecast was for today. So certainly going to have to follow the Caldor Fire closely over the next few days. But somebody did mention that I should check out some of the cams, and in particular, I think they said the Sierra cam. That was the one we were looking at earlier. I believe that's the one that looks over the Strawberry area. We'll also have to take another look at that Heavenly one, where that was an amazing live or imagery time lapse where you could actually see that wind shift happening, where it illustrates some of those gusty, erratic winds that you can get on a fire that leads to very erratic, dangerous fire spread. Where are we looking? We're looking for Sierra here. There it is. You know it's been a long live stream when you can't find something that's right in front of you. So it looks like they've actually turned this camera around. It's now looking to the east. So I'm interested to see what this looked like in the last 3 hours. We might even be able to see that camera turn around. So I believe this was when it was still looking west. You can tell that because you'll be able to see that sun peek through the smoke right there. So you imagine sun sets in the west, so that was when that camera was pointed to the west. Towards the end of this, we should see, there will be some point in this video where the camera flips around because it looks like it's looking to the east as of right now, which I'm interested to see this camera fully update because, oh, they keep turning it around. So looks like we're going to have all kind of angles to look at once that loads. But in the meantime, while that's loading, that'll probably take maybe a minute. I do want to go back to Twitter to see if there's been any more critical information, because that's one of those things you... One sec. Had to just turn some lights on. It's been pitch black in here for like 30 minutes. So key thing is always to try to stay updated with the most recent information. One of the best places to do that is actually Twitter, especially if you only follow fire accounts like I do. But this is case in point. This was 2 minutes ago. This is one of the best accounts to follow, CA Fire Scanner. And right there, Caldor Fire, 168,000 acres, and containment has dropped to 13% per evening update. So you might be wondering why containment can drop. Usually it's because the fire grew so much throughout the day that if your actual containment stays the same, then the overall percentage drops. So it's almost kind of a statistics type thing for why that containment dropped, is because the overall fire perimeter increased, which means the percentage decreased. Per evening update, 21,000 structures are threatened. No mention of them losing previously contained areas, so likely that the drop is due to the expanding uncontained areas of the perimeter. So I probably should have just finished reading the tweet because that was a much more concise way to say it than I did. But he also posted this 13 minutes ago. Here is fresh intel. I'll also zoom in. Sorry if you couldn't really read that. Here is fresh intel from 5:20 p.m. showing the location of eastern head of fire. So this is exactly what we want to look at. The most recent information based on this intel is a lot more credible than the hotspot maps that we look at here. Again, we look at this because it's the best resource that we do have right now, but this will give us a much better picture of what's actually going on. So showing the location of eastern head of the fire approaching Echo Summit. So just clicking on that, you can see there's Fallen Leaf Lake, we got Echo Lake, Phillips, Twin Bridges right there, Strawberry right there. So I think that is a very important photo to look at right there, because it basically describes exactly what I've been trying to reiterate when it comes to this hotspot map. Looking at this hotspot map, you would think that all of the structures in this area, all of Strawberry, all of the Twin Bridges and all those communities under those hotspots, you'd think they are completely gone based on where you see those hotspots showing up right there. It looks like all those orange dots are under those hotspots and that they've all been destroyed at this point. But hopefully that loads up a little better. I'll close Windy for the time being so it hopefully loads faster. But when you actually look into their most recent mapping operation, looks like 3 of the key spots that we've been talking about, Strawberry, Twin Bridges, Phillips, it looks like those areas are not where we're seeing. It's basically the point I'm trying to make is it's not like that entire area is completely burned out. That's basically the point I was trying to get at there. And you actually look at where you see those 3 spots that we've been following very closely, Strawberry, Twin Bridges, Phillips. It looks like as of 5:20, they weren't currently covered in that entire fire perimeter. The last thing you want to see is a dot with a city name underneath that fire perimeter. That means that the fire completely moved through that area. Looks like, again, I'm always a little hesitant to say this because it's about 8 o'clock right now, and this image was from 5:20, and we've seen how much activity has been happening over the last couple of hours. It's what we've been following. So this map definitely has changed since 5:20, but I'm just saying that as of 5:20, we weren't seeing Strawberry, Twin Bridges, Phillips completely under the fire perimeter, and that's good news there. But again, with that being said, we are going to have to keep an eye on new maps coming out. Actually, we could check out Zeke Lunder's website. I think he says there's a number of maps on here, because there's most likely going to be more updates coming in. So this is another angle of the same thing we were just looking at, where it looks like you can see the extent of where the Caldor Fires reach. So that is where the bad news comes in. Again, I do always try to put some kind of, just to minimize fear, focus on any good things that we can. But at the end of the day, you do have to recognize this is, I would say, one of the worst wildfire situations that we've seen throughout this year. And depending on the next couple of days, it has the potential to be one of the worst situations we've seen throughout California history. But as of right now, that map is showing those key cities outside of the fire perimeter. But where the bad news comes in is you can see how much it grew throughout the day today. So I wonder if he has... So I believe this is actually a perfect map to look at how unprecedented that growth was today, how much more growth we were expecting, or how much more growth ended up happening than what we were expecting. I believe that darker shade right there was the previous fire perimeter, and then that orangish shade right there is what burned throughout the day today. So again, everybody was, including me, was so focused on the wind event coming in Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, where we have those 35 to 40 mile per hour winds coming in from the southwest, pushing the fire up to the northeast, that at least in my case, I almost kind of... One second, I want to make sure something. Sorry, my other screen where I have the live chat open was about to shut down, so I wanted to make sure that didn't happen. Also, apologies for not looking at the live chat in quite some time. I do see that somebody did just mention the Sierra Cam. Let's see. Okay, so that answers my question. My fire scanner was also still going. I turned it off because it was almost getting to the point where it was distracting. Very active right now. But what I was, I'll just wrap up what I was saying, and then we'll check out the Sierra Cam. Was you can see where the fire perimeter was yesterday. That orange color shows all that new growth that we had today. So my main focus was on that wind event coming in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but you can see that even without that wind event, we had a massive day of fire activity. So now I can see a number of people are saying Sierra Loop. So it hasn't loaded up to this point. So I'm going to change it to 1 hour, like the suggestion in the live chat, and see if it... Oh wow, it looks like we're getting some fire activity in there. So let's go to 1 hour. Hopefully this loads this time. looking at the direction the camera's angled, it looks like that view is looking towards Strawberry, or the Twin Bridges, Strawberry area where we're just looking at. Actually, while that's loading, we can almost match that up with the other map. One thing, we will likely see this rotating around though, because we have seen the camera itself rotating around. Just getting an idea of, so that camera right there, I know it's probably kind of hard to see, so I'll try to zoom in even more. There's that camera. It's been going around, so once this fully loads, we'll be able to look at it. Looks like we have Sierra Tahoe Resort to the west. We have Twin Bridges and Strawberry to the west. We have Phillips to the north, Nebelhorn to the northeast. And then and then try to match up that map with that current fire perimeter map we were looking at, where Strawberry, Twin Bridges, Phillips. So you imagine, I would guess the camera's somewhere around right here. So it's been mostly looking at that Strawberry direction to try to see that fire activity that the infrared intel was able to pick up. And again, you can find that map on Zeke Lunder's website. And yeah, so waiting for this to load up. Looks like it's about 50% of the way there. We've seen this website is a bit slow recently, possibly because I have about 40 tabs open, but also probably because I imagine there are lots and lots of people using this website right now. See, somebody says, can you please zoom in to see if you can locate Mount Ralston on Highway 50 between Camp Sacramento and Sierra Tahoe? So the best way, if you actually want to look at a specific place, is to look here, Mount Ralston. So again, this is one of those kind of caveats that I have to say is, based on the hotspot map, you'd think that Mount Ralston has, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, is completely within that fire perimeter. Just zooming in, it looks like it's right there. But that was the key point I was just making, showing this map. It's not like all that fire growth we've had today is completely continuous and everything underneath that hotspot that's being shown on this map has burned. You can see when you actually look at the more high definition imagery, it's very not continuous growth. And if you were just to look at the hotspots, you'd probably see this entire circle right there is showing up as an active area that has burned. But you can see that as of 5:20, that wasn't the case. But with that, I will also state that a lot has happened in the last 3 hours. So can't really confirm that the map still looks like this. In fact, I can almost confirm that it doesn't still look like this. But as of 5:20, that's the point I'm trying to make. It wasn't that everywhere under that hotspot was completely burned out. You can see that there are areas, especially like where you see Twin Bridges and Phillips, that still appear to be out of that fire activity. Let's see if that camera loaded up. I've seen people, man, the live cams are not working too well right now. They keep freezing at about 50%. So it loaded about 20% when we were trying to look at 3 hours, 50% when we were looking at 1 hour. So let's see if we can just check out the last 15 minutes from this camera. And it does look like you can actually start to see some actual fire activity going on. And the flames themselves, which I would say yeah, it's freezing again. Which I would say goes along, because you imagine that camera is somewhere right about there. So you imagine that part of the fire is pushing closer and closer to the camera. It actually looks like the camera is right on the eastern side of the ski resort. I believe that would be the ski resort in there. So it looks like the fire has pushed closer towards that area. I wish the live cameras were actually working. Starting to get more view. Let's go back to the beginning, see how much is loaded there. Definitely seeing some flames on that one. Lots of activity. It'll be interesting to keep reloading this one over the next few hours to see if the camera itself actually burns over. Now, one thing we can also do, if the Alert Wildfire website isn't really working, we can check out the Alert Wildfire Twitter, and usually when there's big things going on, they will actually post about it. Oops. Jumped the gun there. So this is the time lapse of the Caldor Fire throughout the day today. Oh, that's weird. Links don't show up in the live chat. That's weird. I wonder if that's in my settings or something. I'll look into that in the future to see if... it's probably actually good to have that turned off now that I think about some of the trolls that we do get in here, but it is a good thing that we have such an awesome moderator with Lucy. She usually is unbelievable at keeping those trolls out of this chat and keeping it very useful and informative. So yeah, you can see that time lapse throughout the day today. Just a huge increase in activity on the Caldor Fire. Again, over the past few days, I'll try to just do a quick summary of everything we've talked about while we look at this time lapse. Before I do that, I should probably take a sip of water. Alrighty, so basic summary for the Caldor Fire. Over the last few days, we had diminished activity because as the high pressure built in throughout this weekend, it brought in some weaker winds, which allowed that smoke to just settle down to the surface, kept a lot more of that smoke in California instead of pushing it directly into Nevada. But as we saw throughout this morning and into this afternoon, a lot of that smoke that was keeping our fire behavior calm over the last few days started to clear out. And you can actually see that on this imagery right here. In past days, when we were looking at cameras for the Caldor Fire, you really couldn't see anything because the entire screen just looked basically gray with that thick smoke inversion that had settled down over the fire. And the main reason that had calmed the fire behavior down is you imagine sunlight trying to get through all of that smoke has a very hard time, keeps your temperatures lower, which keeps your winds lower, and we got a little bit, there was certainly still activity, don't get me wrong, on Friday, Saturday, but much less than we were seeing today. Today, that smoke cleared out, so what that allowed was those warm temperatures really to start to pick up, and then the biggest impact of those warm temperatures is that's where you get a massive drop in relative humidity, where we saw some places drop into the low teens to even the single digits. And with that dry air, the fuels get even drier, which, as you can see in this imagery, allowed the Caldor Fire to pick up in activity throughout the day today, and unfortunately, still picking up as I speak. One of the key things to think about, I was just talking about how that dry air makes the fuels dry, which allows the fire to continue to spread. Now, you might be thinking as we get into the overnight hours that'll calm the fire down, because during overnight, you'd intuitively think you get up to maybe 60-70% relative humidity and it'd calm the fire down. But unfortunately, as we go through the next 12 hours, we're going to have very poor relative humidity recoveries through the overnight hours. Now, what that means is that basically the air is staying dry overnight, and what that means is we're going to continue to see fire activity overnight tonight. Now, with all that being said, with this increase in fire activity that you're currently seeing the time lapse of, we have a large number of new evacuation orders being put in place, and unfortunately we've been seeing some other videos as well of some structures being destroyed. Now, I usually try to stay on the positive side, try to find some silver lining, but the bad news moving forward is that you can see all of this activity that we had throughout the day today, the extreme fire behavior, the pyrocumulus clouds, the spotting, the fact that it was able to grow over 3 or 4 miles, might even be 5 miles at this point. That all happened when the winds weren't actually that much of a factor today. Directly around the fire, you get some erratic gusty winds because you imagine all of that heat coming up from this cloud right here. That's a lot of rising air, so you get those gusty erratic winds filling in where that air is rising. But in that Cal Fire update at 5 p.m., they were saying that winds today weren't actually that big of a factor. Now, that is actually bad news because tomorrow, both Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we're going to have those same conditions that we had today that led to a large amount of fire activity, the clearing air, the warm temperatures, the very low relative humidity. But Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we're also going to have extreme wind gusts coming in. So basically the top 3 fire weather variables we always look at are temperature, winds, and humidity. Temperature is pretty self-explanatory. The warmer it is, the worse wildfire is going to be. Relative humidity, that one, basically you can think of that as the drier the air is, the drier the fuels are, and then the faster wildfire is going to be able to spread. If that, to make intuitive sense of that, you can think about a campfire. If you've ever tried to start a campfire with a moist log or a dry log, it's pretty self-explanatory which one's going to be a lot easier to start the fire, which one's going to burn a lot faster, and which one is going to burn a lot hotter. So that's why temperature and humidity are important. But in my personal opinion, wind is actually the number one factor that leads to the rapid fire spread that we see, and that's for a large number of reasons. 1, those winds can actually just push the fire forward. 2, it can supply more oxygen to the fire. And 3, and what I think is the most important factor that wind plays on wildfires, is that it's able to pick up burning embers. You can imagine a burning ember being picked up into the smoke plume, carried out where the fire hasn't burned yet, dropping into these critically dry fuels that are in extreme drought conditions. About 85% of the state is in those extreme drought conditions. The San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory has shown that the fuels right now are the driest that we've ever recorded, going back to our data set starting in 2009. So the winds pick up those burning embers, drop them down. It drops into those dry fuels with a 90 to 100% rate of ignition, and then starts new little fires and leads to more rapid spread. So that's the 3 factors that are all working against us, unfortunately. And if we actually look at the CalTopo map right now, you can see where those hotspots are based on where those structures are. And basically everything I just said is the exact opposite of what you would want to see. With the warm, dry conditions coming in, it's going to have the same kind of increase in activity that we had throughout the day today, but we're also going to have some 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts picking up Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday that are going to try to continue to push that fire farther towards the northeast. So this is definitely going to be a situation we have to follow very closely over the next few days. I think because of that, I'm actually going to I am going to wrap up this live stream at this point. Been going for, I think, 3.5 hours maybe at this point, and as always, I don't try to create any unnecessary fear, but the fire weather forecast is actually looking even more critical for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday than it was for today. So I do want to save some of my voice for the unfortunately the updates that we're going to have to do over the next few days, where conditions actually appear to be getting even worse. But with all that being said, you can see where those hotspots are right now, where we have a lot of those structures. I'll remind you again, those hotspots, it doesn't mean everything underneath those hotspots has burned. If we look at the most recent map of where the fire itself actually has burned, you can see that it's not just continuous growth under that entire area, but we have had a large increase where you see that orange area. Looks like Strawberry, Twin Bridges, and Phillips are going to be some of the key spots to watch throughout the next 12 hours. As I said, fire activity will continue overnight, but then certainly over the next couple of days as the fire conditions actually seem to be picking up. So with all that being said, key thing to keep an eye on are those evacuation warnings and orders, and any updates that might happen there. I'll actually just update that again just in case there have been some new ones popping up. I don't want to end this video showing the wrong map. But again, this is a developing situation going on right now. If you are in this red color on this map, that means there is an evacuation order, which is mandatory. If you're in that yellow color, it means it's an evacuation warning and now is the time to get ready. And with that being said, I would say key thing is to stay updated with all those local resources. You can find this link in the description below. Also go to Cal Fire and InsuWeb as well. And if you want to stay updated for the video and live stream that I'll do tomorrow when that wind event starts to come in, you can subscribe to this channel, and then you can also click the little bell icon so that you actually get notified when I go live tomorrow. So apologies for wrapping it up early. I know this is still a developing situation, lots going on right now, but it is going to be a long couple of days ahead, so I think it's important that we all kind of rest up and get ready for what is ahead, because unfortunately I would say it's one of the most critical wildfire situations that I personally have done updates and forecasts for. So we're just going to have to stay tuned to see what happens. I will try to end on some kind of positive note. You can see that we do still have 3,500 personnel in this fire, and we've seen the amazing work that they've done in the past to protect structures in areas like Chester or Janesville. So they're going to be working around the clock to keep our structures safe, keep our lives safe. So and the other thing I'll say is 2020 was just an absolutely terrible wildfire year, and we were able to get through that. So we will be able to get through anything as we move forward, but it is going to be critical to stay updated with all this information just to make sure that we follow exactly what's going on the ground. So with that being said, thank you to all the wildland firefighters out there for all the amazing work you do. Thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who's been affected by these wildfires. Huge thank you to everybody posting the great questions and also the good comments about which cams to look at. That actually, it really does make these videos better when you guys have suggestions in the live chat. And again, the reason that is possible is because we have such awesome moderators like Lucy, Robert, White Dove. You guys do a great job of keeping the live chat informative and helpful. So again, another huge thank you to all the moderators helping to keep that live chat informative, because again, I don't always look at it. So if somebody asks a question, it helps if there's not a bunch of trolls in that live chat and somebody else can answer the question for them. But again, that was quite a long conclusion right there. But final thing I will say is that I will be back tomorrow. We will be getting through these next 3 days together. So you can subscribe if you want to stay updated on that, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks for watching.